Chapter 426 The new shop owner is playing The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. Has this kid lost his mind? He dares to mess with the Nangong family. It's better to mess with the Heavenly Academy than the Heavenly Seeking Sword Palace. Someone clicked his tongue and said, everyone who offended Heavenly Seeking Sword Palace met tragic ends. If they send sword slaves after you, they won't stop until you're dead. Go. Let's go now. We can't be seen with him. The crowd that packed the entrance of the shop front was gone completely very soon. They looked as if they were afraid to catch a plague. Even the old man left the city during the night after selling the shop. He didn't dare to linger in this city any longer. Chief President Li Lanruo and the others walked into the shop. They looked around at the neighboring shops which were packed with customers and then at Fang Qi empty shop where even a ghost couldn't be seen. It looked as if the small area in front of his shop divided his shop from others, making it seem like it was in another world. How come your shop has no customers and is quite desolate? Li Lanruo looked around the street in bafflement. Fang Qi pointed at the shop and said, come and help me clean it. No matter if you can enter Heavenly Academy or not, you can come and manage the shop for me when you have time. Li Wei said with a chuckle. Then, I'll just stay here and keep the shop for you. I'm old and won't go and take the academy exam. Li Lanruo said hesitantly, then, while clearing the shop, Mr. Fang said, you can go to the academy with Xiaoyu, you two can keep each other company and help run the shop after school. Li Lanruo asked, who's Xiaoyu? A little girl. I think you two will get along. Ugh. A little girl. Li Lanruo froze. And only a little over 10. Since when can teenagers enter the Heavenly Academy? Besides, does this little shop need so many people to manage it? Li Lanruo was full of questions. With the help of the members of the Li family, the shop was soon cleaned. The total area of this shop was even larger than that of the half-city shop, big enough to accommodate 200 computers easily. Since Li Lanruo lived in Taiwan with her companions, 1 male and 2 female disciples, their accommodation was not an issue for the time being. Besides, the shop had 3 floors, and it was big enough to provide dorms for all the employees even though the system only renovated 2 dorm rooms. For the time being, the shop provided food and dorms for the employees, but they had no salaries or benefits yet. On the next day, Li Lanruo looked haggard as she came into the shop. Mr. Fang asked in surprise, what's wrong? Where are the other 2? Only elder Li Wei and a round-faced girl who was about 17 years old came with her. The latter had freckles and puffed red eyes, and she was shy and didn't speak. On the other hand, Li Wei looked angry. Now, Li Lanruo said in resentment, they are no longer members of Li family. Fang Qi said casually, it doesn't matter that they left. After all, they can do nothing here but watch and clean the shop, which are chores that they have to do just like when they were servants back in the Li family. I'm sorry, Li Lanruo looked sad, but Fang Qi brushed it off as a tiny incident that wasn't worthy of his attention. He opened the shop door and saw that the interior had taken a new look. The counter was made with a giant piece of smooth and crystal clear black marble, and the shop door and walls were all glass. More than 200 computers were placed on 2 floors. The first floor was divided into 3 sections while the second floor was 1 section itself. Rows of neatly placed monitors and keyboards were lit with colorful lights, the light reflecting off of the smooth and heavy desks. The colorful lights were very eye-catching in the dim space inside. After walking through the entrance, a huge glass screen was to the right, and these people didn't know what it was for. Li Lanruo almost thought that she went into the wrong place. She asked in surprise, Guild President, what business do we do here? She had thought that it was a shop selling rare treasures. Now, she knew that she had been mistaken after checking it out herself. She was clueless. What are these things? She felt like the inside of the shop was totally another world. Fang Qi chuckled. Welcome to the Origins Internet Club. In the future, you will work here. He pointed at the rules written on the small blackboard and said, "Show no mercy to anyone who breaks the rules, no matter what background they have." The words on the small blackboard were, "The troublemakers will get their cultivation strengths destroyed before being tossed out, they won't be welcomed again. Play if you want but get out otherwise." Covering their mouths, the two girls were so stunned that they were at a loss for words. Even Elder Li Wei said in disbelief, "Guild President, aren't the rules a bit too harsh? After all, this city was full of major forces, and many of them had power beyond their imaginations. If any member from these forces got their cultivation strength destroyed and legs broken, the shop would be in huge trouble. Can't we modify the rules?" Li Lanruo knew that the person before her was powerful, but compared with some huge forces, his background was probably not as solid as those forces. Fang Qi said, "These are our rules, play if you want but get out otherwise. If they don't like the rules, they don't have to come." Li Lanruo was at a loss for words. While pointing at the door, she said, "Guild President, I'm afraid that no one will come." Indeed, no one came in as it was deserted in front of the shop. Even the passers-by made detours around the shop. How could they have customers? Mr. Fang said, "It doesn't matter if no one comes. We can play ourselves if that is the case." It must be noted that the new shop only had access to the old online games. Single-player games would be released after 3 months. The movies and TV series were not restricted by this rule. Mr. Fang turned on a computer for himself. At this moment, he heard a crisp prompt from the system. "Beep. Task, booming sales is completed. Task target, number of GTA 5 players reaches 3000, completed. Task reward, gaming prize wheel, can win a game on the wheel, 1 luck treasure chest." Task description, it should be a piece of cake for this game to reach the sales target of 3000, right? This task is completed. Fang Qi was surprised that the task was completed at this moment. Meanwhile, he received a new task. New task, new online game. Task description, the game can only be activated by unlocking more world views. World view unlock, please unlock more sci-fi world views, 5 sci-fi games/movies reaching average sales of 1000, please unlock more magic world views, 8 magic fantasy games/movies reaching average sales of 1000, task reward, Dungeon Fighter Online Virtual Reality Remake, 1 luck treasure chest, large. He was surprised that such a task appeared. However, he couldn't do this task yet. He must find a chance to promote the genre of games and movies required for unlocking the world views. Right now, he thought that he should turn the prize wheel and open the treasure box. Immediately, Fang Qi opened the system interface and turned the prize wheel. Beep. You got a new game, The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. Li Xiner, Li Wei, and Li Lanruo stood behind Fang Qi and watched him operate the computer, and they were all in puzzlement. Fang Qi put down the virtual reality headset and asked, "Would you like to try it?" They looked at each other, and Li Lanruo said in the end after some hesitation, "I'll try it." Anyway, she knew that this wouldn't harm her. She took the virtual reality headset and put it on following Fang Qi instruction. Soon, a round mirror made with green jade appeared on the big screen, and it was resting on the ground paved with green stones. Around the mirror, there were options including new story and old memories. In the mirror, clouds and mist floated around, and it seemed like immortals were living there since majestic palaces and buildings could be vaguely seen. On the mirror were the words "The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. What's this?" They were even more puzzled. Following the steps that Fang Qi told her, Li Lanruo chose new story. Soon, the scene before her changed, and she felt like she entered the world inside the mirror while riding on clouds. She yelled in alarm. External communication was opened by default at the beginning. "Guild President, what is happening? I seem to be inside the mirror." "What? You entered the mirror?" Besides her, Li Xiner and Elder Li Wei were also alarmed. What happened? Can you get out? Don't be afraid. You can just take it as a virtual space, Fang Qi explained with words that they could understand. A virtual space? Elder Li Wei said in astonishment, is it a mystical realm? After looking around, he saw no mystical realm and wondered if one could enter the mystical realm through this cubic spiritual artifact. This spiritual artifact is so powerful. This went beyond his knowledge of the world. Don't panic. Lanruo, we're behind you. Li Wei said immediately, what do you see inside? On the screen, he saw scenes flash by before Li Lanruo in the mist, and it seemed like Li Lanruo was stepping on an auspicious cloud that was moving at a great speed. When the mist dissipated, they saw an ancient tree which was so huge that they couldn't find words to describe it. Standing before it, a person was as small as one of its leaves. Under the blinding sunshine, the scenes continued to move upward to the heaven. Mountains stood above layers of dense clouds, and celestial palaces were everywhere under the celestial light. She felt as if she had come into the world where the immortals lived. Where is this place? Wide-eyed, Li Lanruo stared at the scene before her, and the word shock couldn't explain what she was feeling. Right now, she wondered if this was really the immortal world. Li Wei and Li Xiner who were behind her stared at the screen in disbelief. Lanruo, are you in this place? Li Lanruo spluttered and felt like she couldn't put a sentence together. I see it. This looks like the immortal world. Do you see it? She reached out her hand to touch, and each cloud and immortal palace was so real that she couldn't decide if she was in a real world or a virtual space. We see it too. Li Wei's old face was filled with thrill while he pointed at the screen, murmuring, This, what happened? Sister Lanruo. She heard an alarming yell. Watch out! Behind you! Standing on a cloud was a figure wearing an indigo immortal robe and a purple golden hat with his hair and clothes flapping in the wind. In the distance, sunlight fell on the top of the 9 layers of white heavenly clouds, making it seem like they were given a golden crown. With an immortal sword in his hand, the man emitted celestial-like presence. He seemed to be a true immortal as described in the legends. The man turned and glanced at a hill hovering in the air, and the hill exploded as if it were hit by an invisible force. Seeing the horrifying sight, screams of alarm rose. Lanruo! Run! Calm down! He can't see you! Fang Qi's face turned dark while he explained to them. It seems, he can't see me. Sure enough, the valiant-looking man who was wearing the immortal robe and purple golden hat spared no glance at Li Lanruo's direction. Instead, he stared at a mighty man who was wearing red gold armor and looked 70% human and 30% demon. He looked like a proud and aloof king or an almighty demon god. Even a tiny trace of his presence or a casual glance from him gave people a terrifying suppression, containing a force that no mortals could withstand. Li Lanruo's jaw dropped, and her mouth turned into a big O shape in which an egg could fit through. The 2 people watching from behind her also felt as if a lightning bolt flashed across their minds. Who are these people? Demon Lord Chong Lu. Immortal General Fei Peng. An earth-shaking battle between an immortal and a demon unfolded in the new immortal world. Wherever the sword energies passed by, immortal palaces were cut open like tofu. Even the mountain-high immortal statues were hacked into 2 halves and collapsed. One of them possessed ultimate demonic energy, and one trace of it could turn everything around into dust. The other had sword energies that looked like rainbows, shaking heaven and earth. The people in the audience had never seen such a horrifying battle. They felt as if they were being choked by an invisible force. They opened their mouths wide but couldn't speak. Standing inside the immortal world, Li Lanruo more acutely felt the insignificance of mortals, the grandeur of heaven and earth, and the unimaginable force of the immortals and demons. An innate sense of horror filled her mind while she watched the many sword energies and the destructive demonic light collide with each other with earth-shaking forces. Like a scared rabbit, she put down the virtual reality headset and pointed at the screen, exclaiming in horror, "Guild President, what was that? It's terrifying." She was so scared that she almost cried. Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. "No wonder you guys live such a miserable life. Can you be braver? It's just a battle between immortals, it's nothing to be afraid of." Then, he dug out a packet of tissues from his pocket and handed it to her. "Wipe your tears. I'll show you how to play it." "Guild President. What is this?" "This is the main business of our shop." Mr. Fang played the game while introducing the basic knowledge about games to them. "As employees of the shop, even though you don't play games, you must watch me play and gain some basic knowledge about them," Mr. Fang said earnestly, "then, you can explain them better to the customers. Understand?" "Ugh." "Guild President," Li Wei said, "can this really increase our cultivation strengths? Can we learn the ultimate techniques of that immortal general?" Mr. Fang controlled Jing Tian as he got up from the bed and said, "See? In this game, I'm the main character, which means that you can obtain whatever the main character learns. There's another thing called movies in which you can observe and learn everything you see. Now, I'll show you how to play this one." They stood behind Mr. Fang and intently watched him play The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. The guild president got beaten by a beautiful but willful girl. "No. He's not guild president but the main character." While they watched, they whispered to each other. Guild president got scolded by the bookkeeper, "Shush! He's the main character." "Main character?" The main character was beaten by the small demon. "He's just an ordinary person." They followed the plot until Chonglu walked into the pawn shop to pawn the demonic sword. "Isn't he that demon? How come he's here?" Exclamations came from behind Mr. Fang. On the screen, Chonglu looked at Jing Tian with surprise and disappointment before saying with a sigh, "You have come so low." The voice seemed to ooze disappointment and melancholy that had accumulated for thousands of years. When the demonic sword returned to Jing Tian's hand, the story of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 began. The main plot of this game was reincarnation, in which the characters had forgotten the stories in their previous lives. The audience finally understood that this insignificant character was in fact the reincarnation of the immortal general who had battled with this demon lord in the new immortal world. Immortal General Fei Peng and Demon Lord Chonglu were foes but appreciated each other at the same time. This was the first encounter between Jing Tian and Chonglu in the mortal world. All fate and interactions of their previous lives between Jing Tian and Chonglu, Xuejian, and the demonic sword were going to be revealed in this lifetime, and the audience was brought into a wondrous Xiangxia world. If what happened before could be described as that they had been stunned by the horrifying battle between the immortal and the demon, then they now had a strong wish to learn the stories between these characters and their wondrous adventures. "Sister Lanruo, look! The sword can actually follow Jing Tian." Watching the scenes on the screen, the shy girl Li Xiner found that the game was quite interesting instead of scary. "The awe-inspiring immortal general looks just like us after reincarnation," Li Wei asked, "Guild President. Can we really learn this stuff? Will we become the reincarnation of this immortal general?" They knew that it was just a story, but it looked incredibly real even through the screen. It was unimaginable. Meanwhile, outside the shop there's a new shop here. A few stylishly dressed young cultivators curiously looked at the shop front. They were about to enter when the clerks from the neighboring shops hurried over to stop them. "Lord, you can't enter this shop. Would you come to our shops instead?" "We can't enter? Why not?" "They offended someone they can't afford to offend," someone explained. "You'd better stay away from this shop." The shop front was even quieter than before. Of course, inside the shop, the employees were bursting with excitement when they learned that they could experience a true immortal's life after reincarnation. "Guild President, if we play it ourselves," Li Wei was about to ask if the employees had a discount. However, after glancing at the prices on the small blackboard, which was 80 crystals for activation and 2 crystals per hour for computer time, they could well afford it. Instead, he asked, when we have no customers, can we pay and play the game? Of course. Mr. Fang said. He pointed at the 8 words on the small blackboard and said, don't mind others. Play if you want but get out otherwise. Right. 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 Li Wei said in excitement, play if you want but get out otherwise. He wished that no one would come. Since there were no customers in the shop, Mr. Fang didn't mind his employees acting as customers and playing the game during work hours. You can also watch Jade Dynasty and Shu Mountain, don't get obsessed with the game, Mr. Fang reminded them. Okay. Guild President. Everyone was busy playing the game. After returning from lunch, Mr. Fang said, don't forget to eat. Ok. Guild President. Everyone was busy playing the game. Remember, okay. Guild, before they could finish speaking, they saw the message on the screen, your game time has reached the limit. They all looked at Mr. Fang morosely, anyone who saw them would cry since it was so sad. Can't we play a little more? Just a little, Mr. Fang looked at his employees. Are you here to work or play games? As time went by, the players in the other 2 shops discovered this new game and began to play it without Mr. Fang's recommendation. Devil May Cry 3 was indeed great, but it focused on warriors and was not an ideal game for cultivators. In the game, most cultivators got beaten senseless, and they found that Xiangxia games were more to their taste. Several days passed, and the new shop still had no customers. Besides Li Wei and Li Lanruo who were busy acting as both employees and customers, no one came into the shop or even asked about their business. This morning, Li Lanruo and the others were about to leave Taiwan and head to Origin's Internet Club when they heard, look! The little princess of the Zhang family has arrived. Really? Even the little princess of the Zhang family came to the Heavenly Academy. Wang Xiet, Nangang Zhou, Sun Yuan. Including the geniuses who are already studying in Heavenly Academy. My goodness, what a crowd! A message appeared on Mr. Fang's new communication. Jade, boss, is your shop open? Then, he opened the treasure chest. Beep. You got Pegasi Osiris, unlimited, ... Woo, Mr. Fang almost spat out the coke in his mouth. This was a damn race car. It was a remake of a car from Grand Theft Auto 5. Many cars appearing in Grand Theft Auto 5 originated from the world where Fang Qi had been before he traveled through space and time. For example, the Pegasi Osiris was a supercar based on the Pagani Huayra and Enzo Ferrari NE. If Mr. Fang had gotten such a car before he traveled through space and time, he would have been thrilled. But now, he glanced at the low antique buildings and the wide roads. Although the street was wide and flat, there were cultivators walking around, and demon beasts and beast-drawn carriages ran. Then, he thought of his car. Mr. Fang scratched his head. This isn't good. However, he thought back to Dungeon Fighter Online. If this game was released, these people were going to witness satellite beam, gobbled punch, etc. Then, he looked at the spiritual boats flying in the sky. The people here had flying spiritual artifacts, and his was a spiritual artifact for driving on the ground. Suddenly, Mr. Fang didn't think that his car would pose a problem. The inner section of the Taiwan and everything here was more luxurious than the outer section. Each person here lived in a separate cottage which was spacious and equipped with high-level cultivation infrastructure. In fact, the Heavenly Academy's exam was a threshold for ordinary people to see if they could enter the school, which was the Heavenly Academy's initial purpose of the exam. However, it gradually started to change. Some geniuses had begun to use this opportunity to examine each other's strength and see who was stronger. Even though they wouldn't show all their trump cards and fight until the death, they could use this occasion to compete with each other in front of all the talented people from all over the world to figure out a rough ranking. Of course, this year's Heavenly Academy exam meant more than this. Otherwise, it would be the same as the previous exams. This year's academy exam was especially grand for 3 reasons. The first reason was the mystic fate jade. Nangang Zhou came for this treasure. Even though no one knew about its power yet, it was from Fortune Golden Palace, and it was enough for people to go crazy over it. The second reason was Zhang Xiaoyu was sitting in the courtyard of her private cottage. Princess, Your Highness, Gong Zisuan of the Suan family had this gift delivered to you. Why did he give me a gift? Do I know him that well? Zhang Xiaoyu was busy playing with her communication jade, a penguin icon kept jumping. She said impatiently, return it. Princess, Your Highness, young Master Nangang of the Nangang family, I told you to return it. Princess, Your Highness, Gong Zisu of the Su family is waiting outside, hoping to see you, tell him I'm not back. She continued to play with the communication jade. After all, Xiaoyu was very popular. However, the most important reason lied with the Heavenly Academy. It was said that the winner of the exam would become the final disciple of Gu Tingyun, the old academy master, and be taught his world-famous Heavenly Insight Scroll. It was said that Gu Tingyun had used this technique to predict several disasters for different clans and families. In fact, even the locations of previous openings of the Fortune Golden Palace and some of the treasures in the palace were obtained by him ahead of time. Many geniuses who had never come out of their respective families came to the exam for this purpose. At the entrance of the internet cafe, when Li Lanruo and the others came to the shop, they saw Mr. Fang playing with a strange sapphire-colored spiritual artifact in front of the shop. The streamlined body of the spiritual artifact looked like a small spiritual boat. But instead of the usual weaving shuttle or sword shape for spiritual boats, the front of this spiritual artifact looked like a weird snake head. It had the same unique metal luster as the square spiritual artifacts, computers, in the shop. This artifact and all the artifacts inside the shop looked as if they came from a different world. Guild President, what's this spiritual artifact? Li Lanruo asked curiously. It doesn't look like a spiritual boat. Can it fly? No. Mr. Fang glanced at the street and said, flying is strictly forbidden inside the city, right? This thing runs on the ground. It runs on the ground. Li Wei studied the strange spiritual artifact curiously. Why don't you buy a mount if you want to run on the ground? It's cheap and just needs a little time to tame. Why did you get a spiritual artifact? For cultivators, they could produce ground artifacts but didn't think it was necessary with so many demon beasts around. At this moment, some passing cultivators pointed in their direction. Look at that guy. Is that thing a spiritual boat? You're kidding. What kind of spiritual boat has wheels? Can it fly in the sky as well? I wonder who designed this weird spiritual boat. What a sucker. Ignoring them, Mr. Fang glanced at his communication jade. Hey! Guild President, how come your communication jade looks different? Li Lanruo looked over curiously. Usually, communication jades were rectangle or round, but the one in Fang Qi hand was a thin jade slip with complicated patterns. When the jade lit up, a virtual screen appeared on it, and a spiritual cursor moved on the virtual screen. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiaoyu walked out of her private cottage holding a communication jade that looked exactly like Fang Qi. The young master of the Suan family is holding a banquet in Essence Celestial Pavilion today and invited many people to tour Yuanyang City. Why didn't you reply to his invitation? You must express your appreciation to the people who send you gifts even if you don't accept them, the message came from her mother. Why should I accept his invitation? I won't go today. Boss released a new game, and I'll go play the game, she quickly said to the communication jade. Boss, when will you come and pick me up? I don't know the way. Glancing at this message, Mr. Fang thought for a moment and then looked at the race car before him. Should I drive over and pick you up? Meanwhile, Mr. Fang had gotten in the car. You guys watch the shop for me. I'll go pick up someone and be back soon. Well. Guild President. Li Lanruo looked at the doors of the spiritual artifact that were opened like a pair of metal wings, saying, "No flying spiritual artifacts can fly inside Yuanyang City. Can your small flying boat, can it work?" Different from Half City and Zhuhua City, Yuanyang City's array deactivated all the flight spiritual spells and thus didn't need guards to patrol the city. Even the people with powerful backgrounds and privileges couldn't fly in the city. Look! This hillbilly from somewhere wants to activate a spiritual boat inside Yuanyang City. Many passing cultivators said in disdain while looking at Fang Qi and riding on their demonic horses. In the next moment, with the sound of tires grinding on the ground, a blue shadow shot out, leaving a puff of dust behind it. What was that? How come there is such a spiritual artifact? Today, Gongzisuan invited all the geniuses to a banquet in Essence Celestial Pavilion and to ride around the city together afterwards. A young man riding a black tiger laughed and said, "I'm surprised that I'm on Gongzisuan's list, he is inviting me to this gathering." Congratulations! His guards immediately offered their congratulations. "I spent a fortune on this 9-patterned demonic tiger." He pointed at his mount smugly and asked, "Do you think Gongzisuan will like?" Before he could finish, a weird-shaped sapphire blue spiritual artifact flashed past them. What was that? They looked baffled. Even the demonic tiger blinked in shock, thinking that its eyes played tricks on it. "I think it's a spiritual boat. How can a spiritual boat run on the ground?" That young master waved his hand. "Let's go and have a look." "Sir! Sir! You have a pair of sharp eyes. This wind-patterned horse is absolutely a treasure in my shop. It runs so steadily that you'll feel nothing riding on it." A young man led a big handsome horse out of a shop. He patted the horse on the back and said, "Not bad." Not, he looked up and saw a blue tornado flashing past him. It was so fast and steady that it looked like it floated along the road. The young man pointed at the fast disappearing spiritual artifact and asked, "Can it be as steady as that thing?" The shop owner's face turned dark and didn't reply. The young man immediately mounted the horse. "Go! Follow it!" He was curious. What was that thing? In front of the beast stables of the Taiwang in Gongzisuan. "Please! Brother Nangong! Brother Su! Gentlemen! Please!" A dignified-looking young man wearing a green robe cupped his hands to the people around him. The guy that he called Brother Nangong was a big figure, and he had a wide face, a wide forehead, and a mild expression. Suddenly, someone pointed at the entrance. "Isn't she?" A cute loli wearing a plain white dress walked out the gate while dragging a rare and majestic white deer with her. "Well! It has been a long time since I came out with little Belle." The loli rubbed the big white deer's fluffy head, looking quite pleased. The white deer had a pair of silver bells hanging on its neck, and they tinkled while it walked. "Isn't she the little princess of the Zhang family? How come she's here?" She declined Gongzisuan's invitation. "I wonder where she's going." With a polite smile, Sun Yuan walked over and asked, "Sister Zhang, where are you going? Should I give you a lift?" "No. I don't need it." Zhang Xiaoyu shook her head and patted the big white deer's head. "Little Belle, let's go." At this moment, piercing roars that sounded like they came from tigers and dragons appeared from the depth of the beast stables. Instantly, dark clouds gathered in the sky as if an ultimate demon was about to come out. Then, they heard a series of ear-deafening roars. Hearing this roar, the other demon beasts inside the stables all knelt as if they were at the bottom of the food chain and had heard the roar of an existence at the top. The fear that came from the bottom of their hearts turned the whole stables into an uproar. "Ugh! Little Belle? What's wrong?" Zhang Xiaoyu's big white deer also had panic in its eyes and couldn't move even though she pulled. Nangong Zhou's face turned dark. "That damn beast of mine is making trouble again. Wait for me for a few seconds." After a black flash, he vanished. Then, he came out from the beast stables while riding on a black horse with one horn. Covered in pitch-black scales, it looked as if it had been transformed from some other demon beast. When the black horse walked out, Zhang Xiaoyu's white deer's legs turned to jelly and couldn't move at all. "Hey! Little Bell, what's wrong?" Zhang Xiaoyu pulled, but it didn't budge. Angry, she rested her hands on her waist and stomped her feet. Someone chuckled on the side and said, "I think this little deer is frightened." At this moment, she received a message on her communication jade. "Xiaoyu, where are you?" "I'm in front of the beast stables of the Taiwang Inn." She was furious. After sending the message in anger, she glared at her big white deer. "Why are you so cowardly? Brother Nanggong?" With a light sigh, Sun Yuan shook his head and said, "Your mount is perfect in every aspect other than its bad temper. Princess Zhang, if you are in a hurry, you can ride my mount." "Who wants to take your mount?" Zhang Xiaoyu was furious that such a thing would happen when she took her little Bell for an outing. At this moment, they heard a strange sound coming from the distance. Then, with a blue flash, a weird-shaped spiritual artifact raced over and steadily stopped before Xiaoyu. The car window slid down, and Mr. Fang poked out his head. "Xiaoyu, get in the car." "Ah!" Dumbfounded, Zhang Xiao pointed at Mr. Fang's car. "Isn't it? It's the Pegasi Osiris supercar. Very awesome. Do you want to have a ride in it?" Mr. Fang arched his eyebrows. "Yes. Yes. Yes." Zhang Xiaoyu yelled cheerfully and then glanced at little Bell by her side. "But, my little Bell can't move now." Mr. Fang got out of the car and pressed a button on the car key. The roof of the car retracted, and Mr. Fang threw the big white deer onto the back seat. "Let's go. Get in." He put on his wind-blocking sunglasses and drove away with the excited Zhang Xiaoyu and the baffled white deer. The others were left behind in the dust. What was that? Was it a spiritual boat or a spiritual artifact? No idea. It looks like a spiritual boat running on the ground, but not quite. Who was that guy? Everyone was full of questions, and the topic changed to the supercar that they had just seen. "This guy? Who knows him?" Sun Yuan asked curiously. "I don't have the slightest idea, he looks to be quite familiar with the little princess of the Zhang family though." They talked among themselves animatedly. While they were talking, a large group of people raced over on all kinds of mounts. The spiritual artifact went that way. A white-robed young master rode over on a panting mount, and he was also feeling dizzy with the violent bumping. "It's too bumpy. WTF? They told me that it would be steady." Before the car opened the top, it had reached a speed of more than 300 km per hour. Of course, it was bumpy when they tried to chase after the car riding on demon beasts. "Hurry! Follow it! Slow! Slow down a bit! How can that thing be so fast? Hey! It is slowing down! Go! Stop! At least tell me where you bought this spiritual artifact." Dust rose again. Nonplussed in the wind, Sun Yuan gestured to several servants and said, "Go and find out the identity of that man." Sun Yuan looked thoughtful while Nanggong Zhou looked unreadable while sitting on his scaly demonic unicorn. How can this thing be so awesome? As for the speed, the extremely powerful demon beast's speed wouldn't be slow. However, no demon beast could move so steadily at such a high speed. In fact, almost no demon beast-drawn carriages equipped with arrays could achieve this. With wind whistling past her ears, Zhang Xiaoyu had been a bit uneasy at first while her hair fluttered in the wind, but she soon relaxed completely and exclaimed at the sensation. The big white deer lay on the soft back seat, not daring to raise its head. "Boss!" Zhang Xiaoyu turned her head and exclaimed in surprise. "There are so many people following us. Sit tight." Mr. Fang laughed. "Buckle up your big white deer. How do I put the seat belt on little Bell?" Zhang Xiaoyu looked at her little hands, and she couldn't reach the deer. "Move the seat belt with your qi," Snap! The big white deer got buckled up on the back seat. Swoosh! Mr. Fang stepped hard on the gas pedal. In the game, Mr. Fang dared to drive at a speed over 300 km per hour as an ordinary man. With his current strength, he stepped on the gas and raced. My goodness! He is speeding up again. How come it doesn't get tired? How can a spiritual artifact be tired? Can't catch up. I can't do it anymore. Soon, the car had few followers. Shortly, a blue shadow dashed to the door of Mr. Fang's shop. It almost parked before the door horizontally. How are my driving skills? Smug, Mr. Fang killed the engine and opened the door. Superb! Zhang Xiaoyu said excitedly, it's even better than in the game. Ah! A pathetic cry came from the back seat. Oh! My little bell! Zhang Xiaoyu immediately unbuckled it and saw the big white deer sway in the car with dizziness, it was just missing circling stars before its eyes. Clang! It passed out. Obviously, its first experience in the car ride was very poor. Come out, guys! Help me move this creature inside! Mr. Fang yelled outside the shop. There was no garage in this world, but Mr. Fang could put the car in a storage spiritual artifact, which was very convenient. Under his employees' help, Mr. Fang carried the dumb deer to the lounge area and took the cup of milk tea Zhang Xiaoyu poured for him. This is your sister Lanruo. Mr. Fang introduced her to the beautiful girl beside him. She is helping out in the shop and will go to school with you. Hello. Sister Lanruo. This is Elder Li. Mr. Fang pointed at the solemn old man on the side. This is Xiner. Mr. Fang pointed at the shy girl and said, they are all new employees of this shop. Oh, while sipping the milk tea, Zhang Xiaoyu was a bit nonplussed. Boss, how come you captured an elder as your employee? After Mr. Fang introduced these people to each other, the new and old employees got along well. Of course, when Li Lanruo and the other two employees learned Xiaoyu's background, they were speechless. Boss, what did you say? Their minds turned blank. Meanwhile in the Zhuhua city, the customers created a group chat named The Legend of the Sword and Fairy Communication Group. The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1 had been very popular, and the fanbase grew after The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 was released. Zhang Xiaoyu, I'll manage the new group. I'll pull new players into the group. They are new employees in this shop. They are brand new. Husky's cute face, Lu Ningyun, new players again? Let me see. Su Tianji, my Legend of the Sword and Fairy is indeed super attractive. We have new members so soon. Lanruo joined the group chat. Li Weia joined the group chat. Little Xiner joined the group chat. Zhang Xiaoyu, welcome the new members. Su Tianji, new members, do you like Sister Long Kui? Red Kui or Blue Kui? TL note, in the game, a female lead, Long Kui, has two personalities. One has red hair and is aggressive, and the other has blue hair and is gentle. This question drew out many girls who were staying low in the group. Ning Bai, Red Kui is good. Zhang Xiaoyu, I like Blue Kui. Sister Blue Kui is the best. Dong Qingli, don't you like Xuejian? I think Xuejian is so adorable. TL note, Xuejian is another female lead. Song Qingfeng, are you all playing this game? I'm still playing Devil May Cry. They saw the messages in QQ group chat keep jumping up. Ugh! Boss, there are so many people in the other shops. Li Lanruo was still not used to this. They are so enthusiastic. Tentatively, she sent a message, Hell, everyone. I like Su Chongqing. TL note, Su Chongqing is the second male lead in this game. Zika spiritual master, that young man is good. He's knowledgeable and has good manners and high cultivation strength. Su Zixin, F***ck. Su Chongqing is so handsome. Lin Xiao, I think Su Chongqing is handsome too. Ugh, nonplussed, Li Lanruo looked at Mr. Fang. Shouldn't we discuss sword techniques and spiritual spells here? How come the discussion turned to another direction? Meanwhile, in the Taiwan Inn it's almost time. The exam of the Heavenly Academy is about to begin, right? The dim candle light shone on Nangang Zhou's big figure, his mild face looked a bit grim and desolate. Yes, a man answered, he was wearing a black silk robe with patterns of cloud dragons and swords. The person from the Li family will attend it too. Yes. He snickered. Although it isn't convenient to make a move inside Yuanyang City, the rules of this year's academy exam have changed. I'll see how you can slip from my grasp this time. At this moment, the man whispered something to him. You mean? Nangang Zhou frowned. The man who picked up the princess of the Zhang family is the same one who appeared by the Li family when Nangang Zhouwen got killed. His face turned strange, and his expression became thoughtful. Zhang family, he looked unreadable. Before the sword slaves make their moves, they jumped out to protect him? Or is he a member of the Zhang family? Or, it's just a coincidence. Go and find out his relationship with the Zhang family. He stroked his chin while cold glints appeared in his eyes. Shall I test this guy? Jing Tian's greatest strength was his astonishing understanding of Sword Dao due to his identity as the reincarnation of an immortal. The players could feel this strength of his in the game. When he played the game during the tribulation at Penglai, Jing Tian's strength was still average. Despite Mr. Fang's own high-level swordsmanship, he felt a clumsiness while using the sword techniques. However, as the story went on, he soon obtained a lot of inspirations in swordsmanship from Jing Tian's own understanding. Different from The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1, The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 had two main characters and two storylines, which enabled the players to play the game and view the world from two perspectives. They could obtain two different kinds of feelings while playing the game. The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 focused on reincarnation. The story of the reincarnations of Su Chongqing and Ziaishian was full of tangled love from 3 lifetimes. Only when the players went into this world could they understand the deep feelings which had sustained through their reincarnations. Meanwhile, Jing Tian's storyline was divided into 2 parts. One featured the miss of the Tang family, who was both willful and cute, and the other featured Long Kui, Jing Tian's sister in his previous life 1,000 years ago, who had been asleep in the demonic sword for 1,000 years. People felt the weight of this kind of love which had lasted more than 1,000 years. It was enthralling for most of the players in the 2 old shops and more so for the new players such as Li Lanruo. Since there were no customers visiting the shop, they forgot that they were employees while they played the game avidly. The Legend of the Sword and Fairy communication group was always boisterous with messages. Li Lanruo gradually joined the discussion and the topics varied from their favorite girl to who was the most handsome male in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy. QQ messages kept beeping all the time. Apart from these topics, they also talked about the story of Jade Dynasty and the sword techniques and spiritual spells in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. At the lounge area near the entrance, Xiaoyu sat on a couch with a big white deer. The white deer held a cup of milk tea between its front hooves, enjoying the beverage. Yo ha 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 ha! Milk! Milk tea is so good! It yelled the words out inarticulately like a child. It is, isn't it? Zhang Xiaoyu said smugly, I used to eat the delicacies in the shop every day. Yo ha ha ha! Yet! It let out a series of deer laughter. At this moment, a handsome young master who was about 20 years old walked toward the shop followed by an aggressive-looking servant. This young man was wearing a black robe. Young master, the clerk from the cloud bathing shop, the shop next to Fang Qi, tried to stop them. You can't enter this shop. The shop owner offended Nangang. Osh! He screamed. Get out! The servant knocked him over with a kick and gestured to the young master before him, saying, Do you know who he is? I don't care about if it's Nangang or Beigong, there's not a shop in the city that my young master doesn't dare to enter. Ignoring the upheaval behind him, the young master waved his folding fan and glanced around at the layout of the shop. We got the right shop. The layout of the shop comes from the same person who designed that ground spiritual artifact. The servant bowed to him and said, "Young master, the clerk said that the owner of this shop offended people from the Nangong family. It's no big deal. It's not us who offended them." The young master said indifferently, "The people of the Nangong family are more arrogant than I am and are an eyesore for everyone. The shop owner is quite a figure. Let's go in and have a look." "Yes. Yes." Upon entering, the servant yelled, "Sir," he swallowed back his words as he was startled. While pointing at the girl and the deer sitting in the lounge area, he stammered, This, ugh." The young master froze as well. "Isn't she the little princess of the Zhang family?" He walked over immediately. "I'm surprised to see the little princess of the Zhang family in this place. What an honor. Xiaoyu, is he your friend?" Mr. Fang looked at the black-robed young man in bafflement. "I'm Tang Yu." The young master cupped his hands and said, "My Tang family excels in making spiritual artifacts and machines. We saw someone traveling in the city in a ground spiritual boat at a speed greater than ordinary demon beasts, so we come here to pay a visit." Mr. Fang's face twitched. "Do you excel in machines or spiritual artifacts?" The young master looked at Fang Qi as if he were a strange character. "Brother, don't you know that my Tang family always combines machine mechanisms and spiritual artifacts? You can't separate them apart. A few days ago, I saw your ground spiritual artifact run so fast without any spiritual essence fluctuation. I'm surprised that I can find someone in the same circle in the city." Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. "I know I'm presumptuous, but," the young master asked, "can you let me have a look of your ground spiritual artifact?" Mr. Fang thought for a moment and said, "Okay. But you can only observe it for a moment, and you can't touch it." Then, he took out the supakar from his storage spiritual artifact. Looking at the weirdly shaped but perfect ground spiritual artifact, Tang Yuan clicked his tongue and exclaimed in appreciation, "Perfect! Indeed perfect! Everything connects with each other so well. This shape is designed to perfectly avoid the disturbance of winds when it runs. No spiritual essence. Not a trace of spiritual essence. It's completely made with machine mechanisms." He looked as if he wanted to stick his head inside the car. Mr. Fang's face twitched when he looked at this guy who obviously wished to drive away in his precious race car. He hadn't imagined that the incident where he raced in his car would draw the attention of a maniac fan of race cars and mechanisms. Meanwhile, the participants in the Taiwangan had received a message: "The Heavenly Academy's exam will begin soon, the participants must arrive at the Heavenly Academy within 3 days. After glancing around, they couldn't find a place where they could test what they had learned. They couldn't do it outside the shop since the city prohibited flying, and even spiritual artifacts couldn't fly. If some shops needed to test their spiritual artifacts, they must apply for approval to remove the array covering a certain area. Of course, there was no guarantee that the approval would be granted." Mr. Fang scratched his head. For the customers from the other shops, they just tested the techniques in the space in front of the shops and had never encountered such a situation. Ugh! The sword can fly inside the shop. Li Wuya formed a sword spell with his hand and controlled a flying sword to slowly rise and hover in the air. By his side, Li Lanruo yelled in surprise, "Guild President! I know the sword control technique now." Then, Mr. Fang saw a figure dashing past him. The person crashed into the glass door. The door remained intact, but the person. Tang Yu was studying the car outside the door when he heard a loud noise and saw a figure getting stuck onto the door. This person couldn't get down. Mr. Fang, Xiaoyu who was sipping milk tea and the big white deer who was holding a cup of milk tea looked nonplussed. Tang Yu looked at the figure without a word and then turned back to the car as if nothing had happened. "In the future, you must find another place to practice. With a dark expression, Mr. Fang pulled down the figure. Don't make the shop messy and disorderly. However, curious, Fang Qi stared at Li Lanruo, who was still reeling from the crash. Did you fly with the sword control technique? Although she couldn't obtain complete control of her flight, she had indeed flown up with the sword control technique, which meant that she was almost proficient with it. She learned it so fast? After all, many people in Zhuhua City and Half City had spent a long time in practicing the control of the sword, let alone flying on the sword. If he put all the credit on the potential fact that the cultivators of spirit state were more talented. Fang Qi glanced at Elder Li Wuya and saw that the old man was still practicing how to control the sword. It would take a long time for him to fly on a sword. Mr. Fang beckoned at her. Get in the car. Are you going out in this spiritual artifact? Tang Yu immediately walked over. Brother, can you take me with you? Mr. Fang's face twitched. Is this guy a close friend of mine? Seeing Mr. Fang's displeasure, the young master added in a hurry, I heard that you have some trouble with the Nangong family due to this shop? Don't worry, I'll protect you. Okay? That's settled then. Then, he got into the car. Mr. Fang, he wanted to say that he had antagonized Nangong family not only because of the shop, he had also killed more than 100 members of that family. Guild President, where are we going? Sitting in the passenger seat, Li Lanruo watched the fast-passing views outside the window. We're going out of the city. Since she had just begun learning the sword control technique, it was impossible for her to resist the force of the array inside the city. She could only use this technique at full force outside the city. Outside the south gate of Yuanyang City was a huge square named Cloud Sea. There were no roads leading down the mountain. This city didn't even consider receiving any cultivators or warriors who couldn't fly up. There was a parking lot for large spiritual boats near the gate, and cultivators and small spiritual boats could land on this square. Since the square was outside the city, there was no array to restrict flying. Fang Qi stopped his car on the edge of the square, and the deep abyss was right beside it. The river running out of the city poured down like an upside-down Milky Way. Many spiritual boats and flying cultivators landed from the sky, and it was a grand sight. Fang Qi got out of the car and said, "How about you try flying here?" In the next instant, she screamed while an invisible force pushed her off the edge of the square. Li Lanruo screamed, "Ah!" Soon, a woman wearing a blue dress shot up into the sky while stepping on a sword. My goodness! Look at that sword light! What's that? It's so fast! The passing cultivators were dazed by the sight. Tang Yu was also astonished and yelled with widened eyes, "How does she fly like this? She is as fast as the Wind King wings of my Tang family." The vast sky was a fitting practice field for people who had just begun learning the sword control technique, since they wouldn't crash into anything even if they didn't know how to make turns. With a scream resonating in the sky, the sword energy drew a huge arc in the sky and dashed around with an irregular route like a headless fly. But gradually, the person on the sword began to obtain some control of the flight route. Soon, a bright blue sword energy shot through the heavenly mist and spiritual light and slowed down before landing on the square. A woman wearing a blue dress stood on the sword with her hair and clothes flapping in the wind. With bright sword light reflecting in her eyes, she looked like a female sword immortal descending from the heavens. The people around her were stupefied. Mr. Fang applauded. "Great! Awesome! You are a quick learner." She had to learn fast. She almost died of fear. However, she had to say, "Thank you, Guild President. I seem to have mastered the sword control technique." After all, the senior had done it for my own good. She had to thank Fang Qi while she had the urge to hit him. It was a weird feeling. "However, you learned it really fast." While stroking his chin, Mr. Fang looked her up and down curiously and said, "Good. I think you'll do fine in that academy exam. You can at least flee when someone tries to hunt you down." "Flee?" Tang Yu said loudly, she can outrun most of the cultivators. Can she? Mr. Fang said in bafflement, I feel like the sword ball of Nangong is quite fast. She still needs to work on her speed while flying on a sword. Tang Yu said in surprise, didn't you just buy a shop? Why did they use the sword ball on you? He suddenly froze and said, a couple of days ago, I heard that Nangong family lost over 100 people when they tried to hunt down a small family. Are you their targets? Glints flashed in his eyes. Do you plan to attend the Heavenly Academy's exam? Mr. Fang said, she will attend it. Is there a problem? Few forces in the world dare to challenge Nangong family in public. Tang Yu no longer looked flippant. He said earnestly, you guys are indeed amazing. He continued, however, the Nangong family has many trump cards, and they won't let you get away from it after you killed so many people. You must be very careful. If this lady intends to attend the exam alone, he shook his head and said, I don't know what trump cards you have, but this exam will be extremely dangerous. He frowned at Tang Yu's warning. He savored the hidden meaning in Tang Yu's words and began to understand the great depths and accumulation of the major forces in the spirit state. Then, he put away the cigarette and shrugged. Why do people always like making trouble? The Heavenly Academy in the rolling spiritual mountains, there seemed to be spiritual lights flashing and purple spiritual essence rising. The Heavenly Academy was situated in the depths of the misty spiritual essence. In fact, this year's Academy exam went beyond its original purpose. Due to its unusual importance, all the existing disciples of the Heavenly Academy would participate in the exam as well. People still could enter the Academy through this exam, but it would be extremely difficult to get the first place and become the old Academy Master's last disciple, thus learning the ultimate Heavenly Insight Scroll. Of course, for some people, this wasn't their concern since their goal was not the first place. Nangong Zhou's eyes looked cold. It's said that that woman of the Li family has obtained more cultivation strength with the assistance of mystic fate jade. Yes. Young master, the man wearing a black silk robe answered, besides, it's said that she has learned a wondrous sword technique, and she can fly extremely fast while standing on a sword. The cultivators saw it on the Cloud Sea Square. Fast. Nangong Zhou snickered. How fast can she be? Can she fly faster than my sword? What about that kid with her? Nangong Zhou asked, have you found out about his relationship with the Zhang family and his background? His background is not clear, the man said, I only know that he is close to the little princess of the Zhang family. He has a shop in the city, but we can't find out about his background. He's being secretive and trying to act. Nangong Zhou said, you can go now. Yes. After that man left, two ghost-like figures appeared from thin air behind Nangong Zhou. The two black-cloaked figures kneeled on the ground. Act after he leaves the city. The two figures shot out like two pitch-black sword beams. Nangong Zhou had cold glints in his eyes. We'll soon find out who you are. Meanwhile, Sun Yuan, who had been cultivating in his room, suddenly opened his eyes and saw that the sky outside the window had turned extremely gloomy. Crack! A bolt of lightning shot down from the sky with blinding light in the dim sky, and the thunder rumbled. Who has forced the Nangong family to use sword slaves? Fragrant flowers in front of the window bloomed, and several yellow birds frolicked around the eaves. A white-robed young master stood in the corridor in the courtyard and looked at the gloomy sky with an ancient scroll in his hand. The characters on the scroll looked ancient and complicated as if they were written in a language from a distant past. A tiny petal of a flower or a leaf can change one's whole life, or it would be meaningless. In the sky, with many engravings of strange array patterns, a pair of huge wings made with gold and jade spread out, and a black-robed young master faintly smiled. I'll set off before you guys. A flash of light shot across the sky. Then, many spiritual lights shot up from Yuanyang City like fireflies in the gloomy sky. They used their respective powerful techniques and shot toward the northeast direction in the form of light beams. Boss! We're setting off now. On Cloud Sea Square, Zhang Xiaoyu waved her little hand. Let's go to the school, Sister Lanruo. Then, they drew a long trail of sword beam and joined the magnificent river of spiritual lights. Don't be smug. Our senior sister will be the champion of this year's academy exam. A voice mumbled in the crowd. Stop your nonsense. In the crowd, a woman wearing a pure white daoist robe with a pair of cranes embroidered on the hem lightly pushed back her bamboo hat and glanced over. Then, she flew up elegantly riding on the wind. While looking unworldly and ethereal, she followed the crowd in a distance. It was the first time that all the masters of the younger generation gathered so close together. Stepping on her flying sword, Zhang Xiaoyu flew to the foremost of the group smugly. Sister Lanruo, don't worry. The items in the boss's shop are extremely awesome. How many scrolls of the heavenly book have you read? Ugh. Only 3 scrolls, and I haven't fully understood them yet. Don't worry. Zhang Xiaoyu patted her small chest and promised, just watch me. When she stayed in the shop, she was only an employee with a super powerful senior and a mighty boss above her, and she had never had an opportunity to show her abilities. Now, she couldn't suppress the strong urge to show her hand. She was extremely pleased. After all, her boss couldn't come to the exam. The most he could do was watch from outside. It was her opportunity to show her abilities. She almost jumped with excitement. Hear me out. When we're in the exam, just stay with me, I promise that I'll bring us to victory. I've read all the scrolls of the heavenly book and mastered the sword control technique for many years. I can also use all the ultimate techniques including magic shield spell and ice roar spell. Li Lanruo's eyes widened. Her brain went blank. She had just encountered the super powerful senior Fang and wanted to show her hand. However, seeing the super powerful princess who had just appeared, she knew that she had a long way before her. The rolling mountains outside the Heavenly Academy were full of all kinds of demonic birds and beasts. In addition, the origins of these spiritual mountains could trace back to the distant ancient times. Although it wasn't a forbidden zone where no one could pass, these mountains were a dangerous area for ordinary people to move through. Meanwhile, these mountains were full of all kinds of spiritual flowers and herbs and even rare treasures. At the same time, they were covered by all kinds of restriction arrays from ancient times. For this exam, the Academy had put some other restriction arrays in the mountains. The rule for this year's Academy exam was passing this huge area of spiritual mountains and reaching the mountain gate of the Heavenly Academy. Of course, this was the basic requirement for passing the exam. The Academy only had 81 spots, which meant that not all the cultivators reaching the gate would be accepted. They must find as many natural treasures in the mountains as possible, and the people who got the most treasures would rank higher on the list. Treasure hunting had been a necessary experience and a common training method for all the cultivators and warriors. Whenever a mystical relic came out, it would draw large groups of cultivators to explore. This academy used this method to test the participants. Of course, the dangers didn't only come from the spiritual mountains, they may also come from the other participants in the exam. Besides Zhang Xiaoyu, there were other demons who looked unlike normal humans. They traveled here from distant places to seek Dao. All kinds of people could be seen here. This was the Heavenly Academy. A middle-aged man wearing a black robe stood on the deck in front of the crowd. His grey hair was coiled into a bun at the top of his head, pinned by a wooden pin, and he looked like a disheveled daoist. The other was a silver-haired middle-aged woman wearing a white robe. She looked to be about 40 years old. I think you all understand the rules of this academy exam, the middle-aged man said. If you have no objections, you can now fly off the spiritual ship and enter the spiritual mountains. You must reach the academy gate by the end of the 7th day. You will be disqualified if you can't reach the gate by that time even if you obtained many treasures. How difficult can it be? A voice sounded, and the person jumped off the spiritual ship. Then, spiritual lights shot out of the spiritual ship like flower petals scattered down the sky by a fairy. Let's land on Cloud Hacking Mountain over there. Here. It's said that the ethereal summit has lots of good stuff. Junior Master Sun, shall we go to the White Cloud Hill? In Mr. Fang's shop, a big white deer finished its milk tea and lounged on a couch, feeling aimless after losing the job as a mount. Suddenly, shadows appeared before the entrance. For the first time, the shop was graced by new players. Where's Xiaoyu? Zhang Xian strode into the shop followed by a group of people, some looked tough and wore armor while others had furry ears. Zhang Xian looked around. Where's the shop owner? The big white deer who had been calmly lounging on a couch shivered in fear and dropped onto the ground. Your Highness. Princess Her Highness has gone to take the academy exam. Please get up. Zhang Xian waved his hand casually. You don't have to be so formal in the shop. It's inconvenient. Ugh. Boss, Li Wei walked up. Boss is out. What do you want to play? We have the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, it's super fun. Then, he immediately corrected himself, it's super helpful for cultivation. I understand. Zhang Xian thought for a moment, remembering that all the old players expressed themselves this way in the internet cafe. I'm an old driver. Get me milk tea and instant noodles. Zhang Xian yelled. Li Wei and Li Xiner froze. What is an old driver? Zhen Yan. Schwemming. Go and pour a few cups of milk tea. Seeing the puzzlement on the clerks' faces, Zhang Xian was a bit embarrassed, wondering if he had got the wrong words. Yes. He had only gotten to the part of Jade Dynasty where Baiao died and was eager to watch the rest. He took a seat and put on the virtual reality headset before clicking open Jade Dynasty and beginning to watch intently. Sir, Li Wujia's face twitched while he said, don't you want to try our new game, The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3? I want to try it. A big white deer walked over with a handful of crystals in its mouth. Are they enough? It yelled like a toddler who was just learning how to speak and shook the storage bag on its back. If not, I have more. It sounded as if it was still practicing the human language. It had drank milk tea, and now it even wanted to play the game. The two employees exchanged a look, wondering what kind of demons had come to visit the shop while the shop owner was out. As members of a small family, they were shocked by the strange developments. Yo ha 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 ha! This is so fun! It's very helpful for my transformation into the human form. Since the princess didn't need her to be the mount today, the deer decided to take the opportunity to play the game. The two shop clerks felt like crying, wondering what was happening. Boss! Please come back! Can we really let this thing play? However, Mr. Fang was quite busy now. Meanwhile, the cultivators in Zhuhua City and Half City widened their eyes when they saw the message in the group chat. F***CK. Where's this place? A photo was posted in the group, showing a dense forest with an abundance of spiritual essence. Obviously, someone had taken a selfie, and there was also a pretty girl wearing a blue long dress beside her. Look at the bottom on the right. They are 7-leaf flowers. Look at the left. That's 1,000-year-old moonlight grass. Dang! 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 Smug, Zhang Xiaoyu pulled out QQ interface on her new communication jade. The new communication jade newly developed by the Wu Videist Alliance couldn't contain things that were too complicated, but it contained QQ. After downloading QQ, they could transfer the QQ messages into data supported by spiritual essence on the communication jade. In this way, the users just needed to connect QQ on the communication jade to the internet cafe in Yuanyang City. Of course, it would take the cultivators many years to develop their own apps as in the real smartphones. She took a picture of herself with a victory hand and posted, "Now, I'm on Cloud Hacking Mountain outside the Heavenly Academy. Soon, a picture of the cute Zhang Xiaoyu appeared in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy communication group. Sister Lanruo, let's take a selfie and send it to the group chat, okay? Li Lanruo was dazed. You promised that you would bring me to victory. But now, you are playing with the communication jade and taking selfies. If the old academy master knew about it, he might become so angry that he would forbid playing with communication jade during the exam. The big white deer was still playing games. Without any knowledge about games, it just played blindly. It played an online game instead of a single-player game. On the screen, a female wizard wearing cotton clothes stood there with a small wooden sword in her hand. Several warriors stood in front of her. A tough voice came from the Zhuhua army channel, "Guys, what are you doing in the newbie village? We're teaching a girl how to play the game. You know what? This girl is super cute. She speaks like a toddler and is cuter than my own little sister. What? There are girls in the game." A warrior hacked the monster before him and said in excitement. "Yo ha 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 ha! You guys are so awesome!" A little wizard named Lu Xiaoxian looked pleased with a wooden sword in her hand. Chapter 436 Sneak Attack and also steal potato chips. Of course, this token didn't guarantee safety. The participants might die before they could activate the tokens, or some powerful force might just break the defensive stamp of the token and kill them. Everything was possible. In Cloud Hacking Mountain outside Heavenly Academy, Zhang Xiaoyu began to broadcast her exam by posting texts and images on QQ with the communication jade. On the other hand, she had a bag of potato chips. "Sister Lanruo, do you want more?" Zhang Xiaoyu crunched on the potato chips and handed a bag bigger than her head to Li Lanruo while saying with a smirk, "Now, boss can't stop me from eating." While eating potato chips, Li Lanruo said with great enjoyment, "So delicious. How come we don't have potato chips in the shop? I got it from a gift box at the New Year party." She had complained about her bad luck when she saw others getting items like the Black Snow Treasure Sword or Rune number 13. But now facing Li Lanruo, who had never opened gift boxes, she was quite smug. It's a new item that the shop has never sold yet. At this moment, some faint, irregular noises came from the hidden places near them. Look! A black-robed young cultivator pulled the leaves before his eyes and saw a lowly and a blue-clothed beauty who were busy eating potato chips, oblivious to the things around them. "They are alone," another black-clothed young man said as if he had discovered a new continent. "They show no signs, they haven't discovered us for one bit." He beckoned at his companions. "Come over here. Come over here. That girl seems to be the little princess of the Zhang family." A yellow-clothed young man froze as if he had recognized Zhang Xiaoyu. "We might greatly offend the Zhang family if we attack her." "What are you afraid of? We'll just take her items and won't hurt her. In the academy exam, if we don't dare to attack anyone we meet, it's better that we just pack and go home. I checked around and found nothing good around this place. I'm sure that this little girl took them all." "You're right. There were about 10 people in the group. Let's attack at the same time." Many masters from major forces had entered this year's exam, but it didn't mean that the others had no chance. It was hard for cultivators with moderate strengths to survive in the spiritual mountains full of restriction arrays and look for natural treasures. For the smart participants, they either joined a master or formed a group with other participants. When they were in danger, they could deal with it with combined forces and thus reduce damage. This group of a dozen or so cultivators was clearly trying to use this strategy. Some of them came from one force and thus had a tighter bond. More than 10 people sneak attacking too. Obviously, they had greater odds of winning. "Brother Huang, you guys set a net array and restrict their spiritual essence," the black-clothed cultivator said in a low voice. "Do it at my signal, and I'll break her protective spiritual artifact with the black feather snake needle at the same time." "Okay. Brother Mo, you even brought black feather snake needles with you. The yellow-clothed man licked his lips. I wonder what elixir they are eating, they seem to be enjoying it very much. Let's take it and try it ourselves. Right. We'll have a taste of it too. The black-clothed cultivator sneered. Then, he concealed his presence and moved forward stealthily. Next, an air-piercing whistle came. Move! With a yell, a large pale blue light net surrounded Zhang Xiaoyu and Li Lanruo. The light net spread to the depths of the mountain around them. Under this light net, Zhang Xiaoyu and Li Lanruo's spiritual essence stopped circulating. Meanwhile, several sharp black needles shot toward them with low whistling sounds. It seemed that Zhang Xiaoyu was too dazed to react. Move! The black-clothed cultivator looked pleased. We got them. At his order, about 10 cultivators wearing yellow or black robes removed their concealment and stealth techniques and launched all kinds of spiritual spells and spiritual artifacts. At this moment, they suddenly saw Zhang Xiaoyu holding 2 metal spiritual artifacts with strange shapes, one was black, and the other was white. The black-clothed cultivator felt that she didn't activate any spiritual essence. She is even weaker than I expected. The black-clothed cultivator sneered. The black holes in the spiritual artifacts suddenly shot out burning flames. Crack! Crack! The dozen or so cultivators and several spiritual artifacts dropped to the ground like dumplings going into the pot. We have suppressed your spiritual essence. What is th? Zhang Xiaoyu changed the magazines and murmured to herself, these guns are not good. Without my spiritual essence, their power is so weak. Pu. The black-clothed cultivator spat out a mouthful blood, and it wasn't clear if it was caused by the fury or getting shot. Li Lanruo was at a loss for words while standing beside her. Meanwhile in the distant Zhuhua city, Li Haoran was explaining something to his audience with a few bullets engraved with pale blue spiritual patterns in hands. After many experiments, we've produced the 8th type of bullets, spiritual penetration bullets. While holding one of the bullets, he said, they are derived from the basic magnum bullets, and the guns are based on the special guns originating from those in Devil May Cry 3 which can condense demonic energy. On the bullets, we engraved the special arrays used to break protective spiritual artifacts or spiritual spells. Have you tested them? We tested them only at the spiritual shooting range, Li Haoran said. The shop owner brought Xiaoyu here last time, and she bought some bullets. I wonder if they are effective. Pu. The black-clothed cultivator spat out another mouthful of blood and passed out. The cultivators who didn't pass out immediately lowered their heads. Xiaoyu sent a screenshot to the group chat. I'm awesome, eh? I knocked down more than 10 cultivators in one breath. Awesome! Awesome! Powerful! Xiaoyu is the champion. Then, she looted them cheerfully and took everything that they had. Humph! Where were you when I got attacked and robbed every day in the Legend of Mir 2? My spiritual herbs! Seeing Zhang Xiaoyu taking all of their precious spiritual plants, they felt like crying, wondering what kind of spiritual artifacts could unleash such great power without spiritual essence. How could they survive that? They released their heavenly insight tokens. GG. The level 7 treasures were guarded by powerful demon beasts or had their own self-protective mechanisms besides potential restriction arrays. It was extremely difficult to get them. All the level 6 spiritual items were guarded by restriction arrays, and some of them were also guarded by demon beasts. If one were lucky, they might find a level 6 item object guarded by a weak restriction array. Zhang Xiaoyu's eyes brightened when she saw a level 6 spiritual flower surrounded by some level 5 spiritual grass in the swamp before them. Obviously, she was quite lucky today. Then, she glanced around. Restriction arrays. These restriction arrays are too obvious. Li Lanruo clicked her tongue. These restriction arrays were concealed but not as advanced as those in other places. Were they really this lucky? When Zhang Xiaoyu walked closer to the swamp, several cold gazes flashed in the darkness. Someone's here. Good. They're going to take the bait. They saw a harmless lowly in a white dress and a beauty wearing a long blue dress. Isn't she the woman of the Li family? A voice whispered. For some reason, the Nangong family is trying to hunt and capture her. I'm surprised that she's here. Young Master Nangong is around. If we catch her and hand her to the Nangong family, they were excited at this prospect since it was a rare opportunity to gain favors from and establish a relationship with the Nangong family. Be careful. The other seems to be a member of the Zhang family. She's just a little girl. No one can run from the poison of my Thousand Spider Valley. To help me with this exam, the elders have given me all the top-level poisonous creatures treasured in the valley. Then, we'll rely on you, Deist brother Du Zuzi. No problem. All good. While they spoke, Zhang Xiaoyu broke the restriction array and waved her small hand. Then, a small skeleton appeared before her. The small skeleton walked up with an axe. The small skeleton stopped before the spiritual flower and bent to pick it. Suddenly, a big colorful spider sensed danger, and it jumped up and bit the skeleton. The small skeleton continued to collect the flower as if nothing had happened. The people hidden in the darkness exchanged a look. Deist brother Du Zuzi, what poison did you use? It's a ghost spider. Its poison will travel all over the body through the meridians and blood veins? Do you think that thing has meridians? They fell silent. Where did this skeleton come from? The small skeleton collected the spiritual flower and all the spiritual plants in the area as if nothing had happened. Okay. Zhang Xiaoyu waved her small hand, and the skeleton collapsed on the ground. Here. The level 5 plants are for you. Then, they walked away boldly. No. The people hiding in the darkness were not pleased, and their faces darkened. That's our level 6 spiritual flower. Stop. 1 minute later they all dropped to the ground with multiple gun wounds on their bodies. With their storage bags emptied out, they screamed while lying on the ground. Wait! That's our spiritual flower, don't hit us anymore. In their pathetic howls, the useless items from their storage bags were tossed onto their faces. Feeling powerless, they released their heavenly insight tokens. Meanwhile, on White Cloud Hill a bright-eyed young man wearing a purple robe and a golden belt emitted purple aura which surged up and condensed into a furious purple dragon around him. Beside the purple dragon, there was a demon snake covered in gold iron scales that had a pair of wings. The ugly and vicious head of the demon snake was as big as a person, but now it lay on the ground and couldn't be deader. In Fang Valley, a white-robed young man with long hair stood with a scroll in his hand. Before him lay a huge golden-furred tiger. It lay on the ground and didn't dare to move a muscle as if the harmless-looking young man was a prehistoric demon beast. The white-robed man ambled into the depths of the valley and stopped in front of a huge tree that reached the sky. On the tree was a golden fruit, and the fruit's presence showed that it had probably reached level 7. On the ethereal summit an astonishing sword energy slashed down as if it descended from the sky. On the high cliff surrounded by white clouds, sword energies with sharp and crystal-clear essence knocked down more than half of the boulders on the mountain, startling many birds into flying away. A woman wearing a pure white deist robe and a bamboo hat wiped blood off her cheek, and the cultivators who had tried to besiege the mountain and attack her lay on the ground. From the looks of it, more than half of the cultivators on the ethereal summit were packed here. Senior sister, here are the spiritual items that they collected. A green-clothed girl spat and said, they are as blind as bats, daring to rob us when we found good items. Now, their stuff belongs to us. That's it. The woman nodded slightly and wiped blood from the tip of her sword with a white silk handkerchief. Fierce battles were happening everywhere all the time. However, in one place, things were very quiet. Young Master Nangong. A tall young man wearing a robe with clouds, dragons, and sword patterns on it stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Behind him stood almost 100 cultivators. We are willing to follow young Master Nangong. Nangong Zhou's eyes turned sharp. I saw that the woman of the Li family had gone in the direction of Cloud Hacking Mountain. Send someone to keep an eye on her. Yes, in the group chat at Mr. Fang. Where's the despicable boss? Zhang Xiaoyu stomped her foot. She was showing off her loot but couldn't find her despicable boss. In the sky above the Cloud Sea Square outside Yuanyang City under the gloomy clouds, a figure stood on the blade of a sword. The people on the ground pointed at him. What's that? In the high sky, surrounded by lightning flashes, two black shadows hovered in the gloomy clouds like ghosts. The person standing on the sword was closer to the ground, and people could roughly see that he was a young man wearing a blue and white robe. In the sky, the two shadows suddenly moved closer at a horrifying high speed. Covered in black cloaks, their hands and feet were coiled by chains, and clouds of creepy pitch-black mists were emanating out from their cloaks, making them look neither like humans nor ghosts. One of the shadows pointed its finger. Fang Qi slightly frowned, finding this sword technique resembled the one used by Nangang Zhuwen. He slightly moved to the side at a speed undetectable by the naked eye. Boom! With an earth-shaking noise, a spiritual boat behind him and the cliff behind the spiritual boat were hacked open like tofu. The same sword technique, but the power is unbelievably greater? How come it feels like this guy cultivated the evil avoiding sword technique? Mr. Fang muttered. TL note, the evil avoiding sword technique is a technique in a classic wuxia novel written by Jin Yang, and the practitioners have to be male and cut off their own genitals. Hurry! Retreat into the city. The cultivators outside the city scrambled to run. Suddenly, a cultivator yelled in shock, those are sword slaves of the Nangang family. Who is he? He dares to face the Nangang family's sword slaves and not run. Run, another cultivator said in a snicker, how can he run? Beeb. You receive a new task. New task, establishing dominance is required to keep a foothold. 1. Task description, please defeat your enemies in the most shocking and dominating way. Task reward, fortune prize wheel. The Nangang family of the heaven-seeking sword palace had gained its reputation mainly because of the sword slaves. The Nangang family had gotten even more overbearing in recent years, inducing disapproval from the other major families. However, the other families hadn't shown their displeasure yet since they knew the Nangang family had gotten a lot of benefits from the depths of the Fortune Golden Palace. Another reason was that the Nangang family had many trump cards. This super force had raised war weapons which only had killing in mind. They couldn't feel fatigued and had no emotions. For a long time, no one had ever seen any of these war weapons damaged. In the history of the spiritual state, these war weapons turned everywhere they went into a wasteland but remained intact themselves. Engulfed by thick smoke, red and black huge sword energies hacked down, and people could hear the shrill screams inside the smoke. The mountains on both sides shattered, turning into many giant rocks before collapsing into the abyss. If not for the extremely powerful defense system of Yuanyang City, this city would have been destroyed by the residual energy waves of the attacks. A spiritual light rose outside Yuanyang City. Obviously, the city had activated its defense system. When some sword energies crashed onto the spiritual light, they exploded and scattered like fireworks. The guards standing on the city wall split and gave way to a powerful-looking, middle-aged man who had grey hair. He emitted a mountain-like presence which could shock people when they looked at him. Mr. Castellan. The guards in the area quickly greeted him. The middle-aged man gave them a slight nod and then looked up at the sky with an unreadable expression. The last time that Nangang family sent out sword slaves was about 200 years ago, right? Standing beside him was a middle-aged cultivator wearing a long robe. He looked scholarly, elegant and otherworldly. Yet, it has been a long time. Castellan Zone, how many attacks do you think this young man can block? The long-robed, middle-aged cultivator asked. The Castellan didn't reply, looking thoughtful. 5. The long-robed, middle-aged man gave a range. About 10, Castellan Zong said, from the looks of it, he will lose soon. What a pity! Why did this talented young man mess with YJR Nangong family? The moment he said it, they heard loud noises under the wall. What's happening? Is this kid crazy? I think he's waiting to be killed. In the sky, the young man stepping on the flying sword seemed to have been forced into a corner by the strikes of the sword slaves. Despite the great speed of his flying sword, the sword slaves had built a dense and horrifying net of sword energies from which no one could escape. However, they saw the young man standing on the flying sword do something that they could never have imagined. Looking at the horrifying sword attacks from both sides, Mr. Fang lit up a cigarette cheerfully. The cigarette end lit up and looked bright against the gloomy sky. Then, two pitch-black sword energies shot past him. Crack! Boom! The sword energies hacked down huge pieces from the mountains on both sides. The whole area fell silent. Then, a thin layer of spirit light covered with strange treasure patterns and white flares surrounded Fang Qi. Who, intact, Mr. Fang blew out some smoke from his mouth. His left hand slightly opened, and the spirit light quickly shrunk and transformed into an exquisite palm-sized hollow metal ball covered by strange cloud patterns. It emitted radiant light and looked as dazzling as a mini-sun in his hand. This is... He blocked the attacks. All the cultivators watching the battle gasped and forgot to close their mouths. What is that spiritual treasure? He used it to block the attacks of two sword slaves and remained intact. Ultimate treasure. It must be an ultimate treasure on the same level as those from the Fortune Golden Palace. Golden Sun Wheel. It was one of the ultimate spiritual treasures of the Kunlun faction from the movie Shu Mountain. In the movie, even the Yuan blood demon couldn't break it before it absorbed the energy from the blood cave. At this moment, the sword slaves launched several strikes, and these strikes were as dense as mountains and contained greater force. Ding! Dang! With two huge noises, the two swords hacked onto the spiritual treasure, and the people saw that the young man in the sky didn't move a muscle and remained intact. Not even a strand of his hair was hurt. Did he get it from the Fortune Golden Palace? Many cultivators were green with envy, and they had the urge to rush over and grab it from Mr. Fang. How come there is such an awesome treasure in the world? Meanwhile, Castellan Zong exchanged a surprised look with the cultivator wearing the long robe. I'm surprised that he has such a trump card, no wonder he dares to challenge the Nangong family. The long-robed cultivator shook his head while he watched the sword slaves hack onto the golden sun wheel tirelessly. This spiritual treasure is indeed powerful, but he can't win by defending. When his spiritual essence runs out, he will die for sure. The Castellan nodded. The sword slaves only attack and never defend. He might be able to kill one sword slave with a sudden suicidal attack, but who would trade their life with a sword slave? This young man will die soon. While they talked, many cultivators eagerly moved closer toward the edge of the array as if they were waiting for the spiritual treasure to drop. However, before the Castellan finished his words, a bronze crescent-shaped spiritual treasure appeared in Fang Qi's hand. While holding the burning golden sun wheel with one hand, Fang Qi formed a sword spell with the other hand and controlled the golden moon wheel to rotate around him like a new moon. He remained still when the two sword slaves attacked again. With two crisp noises, two figures separated while the golden moon wheel drew an elegant arc like a new moon. Dumbfounded, all the people saw that these sword slaves had been somehow cut into two halves. The cultivators who had been waiting to pick up the spiritual treasures backed off subconsciously. However, the battle wasn't over. Under everyone's gaze, a vast amount of black smoke rushed out of the broken bodies, and the broken body parts came together, repairing themselves. I remember now, one cultivator on the ground yelled in shock. About 200 years ago, the sword slaves of the Nangong family entered the spirit-destroying array in Green Bull Valley. When they came out, all the cultivators in the valley had their heads chopped off, but the sword slaves remained intact. I thought the rumor was wrong, but now I know it's true. With the cigarette dangling between his lips, Mr. Fang watched in surprise while the sword slaves healed themselves. They're still alive. The Castellan's expression slightly changed. It seems that we have underestimated the depths of this ancient family that has received this great inheritance. These families were famous not only for their great strengths, ancient history, and vast accumulations. Their ultimate geniuses in each generation inspired awe and respect, and many people talked about them. Some even struck fear into people. For example, when he was 19, Nangang Zhou of the Nangang family entered the heavenly abyss sea and killed a rare three-headed black dragon at the divine ocean realm. When Sun Yuan of the Sun family was born, a phenomenon appeared in the sky, and it was said that a demon tried to take possession of his body. However, before the possession process could complete, it was turned into ashes and disappeared. Each of them had awe-inspiring performances in battles. Even Tang Yu, the famous playboy, had killed a demon beast higher than his realm. As for Aloli, she had been famous for her talent, but she had disappeared for a long time since she was a little over 10 years old and re-emerged recently. If re-emerging after disappearing for so long could be counted as awe-inspiring performance, she did have one. Meanwhile, on the sky-patrolling spiritual ship outside the spiritual mountains, the black-robed deist stroked his beard while he stared at the mountains beneath the ship, saying with a smile, "Baoping spiritual master, who do you think has the potential to take the first place?" After his trip in the Fortune Golden Palace, Wang Xie of the Wang family has gained tremendous growth, the white-clothed woman said with a chuckle. With that treasure, he has the greatest potential to become the champion. The black-robed deist said with a smirk, "Baoping spiritual master, you come from the Wang family, but don't forget about our seventh girl who had just come back from experiencing that place. After all, our Saint Warrior branch of the Heavenly Academy has never been weak. You too, don't forget that the members of major families entering the exam are all powerful." At this moment, a white-clothed, middle-aged man walked up from behind. "It's still early to predict who will win." "Brother Feng Yang, you're right," the black-robed deist laughed. Then, the white-clothed, middle-aged man asked, "How about the girl of the Zhang family?" "The girl of Zhang family?" He, they exchanged a smile. "Since that Majesty had asked for a favor from us, we'll let her experience the exam, and we'll monitor her closely and ensure that she can enter the academy." "Okay," the white-clothed middle-aged man said with a nod, "since that Majesty has made the request. Let's see where this little princess is. I hope she won't encounter members of the Nangang family or other families and get knocked out of the exam." "Ha ha ha! I was planning to find her." They all nodded. Then, the middle-aged woman named the Baoping spiritual master drew a pattern in the air, and a strange layer of mist soon appeared before them. In the mist, figures moved. As the mist gradually cleared, they saw Zhang Xiaoyu and where she was. At this moment, Zhang Xiaoyu lifted the potato chips bag which was bigger than her head and poured the last bits of chips into her mouth. "Oh! Gone so soon." Then, she dug out her communication jade from her pocket and looked at it while walking distractedly. Ugh! The lips of the people of Heavenly Academy twitched. Naughty! It's a shame that she is playing even in the Academy exam. No wonder that Majesty had to ask a favor from us. This girl probably can't reach the gate without our help," the black-robed deist said in anger. His eyes were widened, and his long beard moved as he spoke. Outside Yuanyang City, Mr. Fang slightly frowned. It seemed that Tang Yu was right about the Nangang family. This family was indeed hard to deal with. None of the forces in the deserted sea realm was its match. The two sword slaves who had revived launched even faster and more powerful sword strikes. With horrifying whistling noises, each sword hacked onto the golden sun wheel with vicious force, ignoring Fang Qi attacks. Each strike contained terrifying force, and the huge colliding noises were deafening. "This kid is indeed powerful." Standing on the city wall, the Castellan watched the battle with squinted eyes and slightly shook his head. "But still, he's not strong enough. It seems that he has indeed obtained treasures from a relic. However, these treasures are not enough for him to challenge the Nangang family. He is too overconfident. So powerful." This great power comes from only 2 sword slaves. The cultivators standing on the Cloud Sea Square clicked their tongues in fear, knowing that they shouldn't offend people of the Nangong family unless absolutely necessary. After all, this family had more than 2 sword slaves. This kid is overestimating himself, he's finished now. It seemed that the sword slaves had no weaknesses. They were powerful and fearless towards any weapons or spiritual treasures. As if they could never die, every time they were cut into pieces by Fang Qi Golden Moon Wheel, they would quickly recover. The most horrifying thing was that they recovered even faster after being killed each time, as if they were getting used to these attacks. Whenever the sword slaves appear, they won't stop until the targets are dead. It's indeed so, the sword slaves were terrifying. Faced with such a force, the other cultivators could do nothing but be killed. Look! That kid's spiritual treasures can only inflict very little damage to the sword slaves now. This kid's spiritual essence should be running out. This Nangong family has such an unimaginable power and method, an old cultivator heaved a heavy sigh. At this moment, several members of Nangong family standing in the crowd snickered at the sight. You dare to mess with the Nangong family? You're tired of living, eh? Sword slaves, kill him. However, at this moment, Fang Qi suddenly withdrew the golden sun wheel. What's happening? Is he looking to be killed? While they were wondering, Fang Qi aura suddenly changed. A surge of extremely terrifying sword spirit shot up into the sky. It seemed this sword spirit came from heaven and had the power to pull the sky and the earth. Meanwhile, a vague cold shadow appeared behind Fang Qi, looking down on the creatures in the area with aloofness. Subconsciously, a sense of fear rose in everyone's heart. All the swords flew out from the cultivators' belts or storage bags on their own and bent forward as if they were worshipping their god. Who? Fang Qi blew out a mouthful of smoke. At this moment, his potential was stimulated to the limit, and his mind was as clear as the gods. It seemed like he finally understood one thing. Be careful of the people who are controlled by swords, heavenly sword. The most powerful sword control technique of the Shu Mountain faction Sword God. Unlike last time where Sword God created a curtain of swords covering the sky, this time, Sword God unleashed a force that no one could resist, engulfing everything with almighty presence. Meanwhile, the 2 sword slaves struggled violently. Faint and weird light flashed inside the cloaks as if a streak of horrifying, unrivaled force that no one could control was fighting for the control of their bodies. Ah! Suddenly, the 2 sword slaves let out shrill screams. Boom! Boom! The figures and the swords instantly exploded on their own and turned into ashes. All the people held their breaths at this strange scene. The sword slaves, who were extremely horrifying and had almost no weakness in their eyes, had just imploded. What was that godlike shadow which looked like a surge of horrifying sword spirit coming from heaven? Many questions swirled in their mind while they stared at the young man before them in horror. Then, Mr. Fang landed from the sky and extinguished the cigarette butt. Do you have a garbage can? Let me throw this away. Many people here couldn't block one attack from their swords since the sword techniques of the sword slaves were so advanced, let alone that they had no weaknesses and had the strange ability of not dying. For them, such humanoid war machines were nightmarish. They couldn't imagine what would happen if such a horrifying nightmare fell on their heads. They had no way of dealing with it, and it was impossible to resist. However, just a moment ago, these 2 terrifying sword slaves just kneeled before the young man and killed themselves at his order. This turn of events had gone beyond everyone's imagination. They felt like the man before them wasn't a human being but the god of swords. Perhaps only the god of swords could do this. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The members from the Nangong family looked as if they had seen a ghost. The sword slaves of the Nangong family had been unrivaled, but they just kneeled before a young man from nowhere and killed themselves today. The fear-inducing image of the sword slaves collapsed in their hearts. It completely collapsed and shattered into dust. What technique did you just use? A member of the Nangong family asked in horror. It was Sword God. Mr. Fang looked around but couldn't find a garbage can. To prevent polluting the environment, he released a flame from his hand and burned the cigarette butt into ashes. Then, he added, it was Sword God cast at the Heavenly Sword Realm. Fang Qi had just been standing before the threshold of the Heavenly Sword Realm. After his potential was stimulated by the magical cigarette, he stepped over the threshold and reached the realm. When No Name reached the Heavenly Sword Realm, all swords submitted to him. When he reached the highest level of the realm, no one could move a sword before him. Since Fang Qi had found a way to reach this realm, his power was now unrivaled. Combining this realm with the Sword God of Shu Mountain faction, the most powerful sword control technique, it wasn't surprising that he could control the two demonized swords. Heavenly Sword. Sword God. Today, almost all the cultivators in Yuanyang City remembered these two fear-inducing names. Today, they witnessed a sword technique that they had never heard of before. They could force all the swords in the world into submission. Mr. Fang patted the member of the Nangong family on the shoulder. The latter had yelled and asked the sword slaves to kill Fang Qi. An intense smell of urine spread out while this young man collapsed. Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. Am I so scary? The stout Castellan Zong and the middle-aged man who was wearing a long robe walked over, and the Castellan cupped his hands at Fang Qi, saying, I'm surprised that your swordsmanship has reached such an unrivaled realm. Can you tell us who is your master? Master. Mr. Fang said, the man who taught me the heavenly sword is No Name. As for the sword god technique, many people can use it. Zhongwu's face twitched when he heard that many people had learned it. Then, where are these masters? The middle-aged man immediately asked, can I pay a visit to them? Mr. Fang said, this. Zhongwu looked disappointed. Could it be that the seniors don't want to see us? In my opinion, some people here are not qualified to meet these seniors. The middle-aged man wearing the long robe looked around, and the people who had ill intentions backed off subconsciously and moved away. You can see them, but it would be 2 crystals per hour, Mr. Fang said. Ugh! Like that? Not only Castellan Zhongwu and the middle-aged man wearing the long robe, but all the people around them were stupefied. After a moment of silence, Zhongwu said, please take us to them then. He looked as if he would sleep with these seniors in the night if there were no rules forbidding that. Soon, dozens of people eagerly walked into the internet cafe with Mr. Fang. Inside the internet cafe, several hairy-faced men who looked like they hadn't fully evolved were watching something intently, each with a bowl of instant noodles in their hands. A big white deer sat before a computer near the entrance and yelled at the screen with a bottle of Coke between its hooves. A few words were written on the small blackboard. 2 crystals / hour. Zhongwu pointed at the main item written on the small blackboard and asked, what is this legend of the sword and fairy 3? Where are the seniors? He looked around and didn't see any senior. Li Xiner looked baffled, wondering how the boss came back with so many customers with him. She immediately walked up and asked, Misters, what do you want to buy? Our shop's main game is the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, it's, awesome. Li Wuya had learned this expression, feeling like it would make him look more like an old driver. Zhongwu cupped his hands and said, I want to meet a senior who knows the technique named Sword God. Then, you must play the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. There isn't only Sword God but Demonic Flame Space Flashing Strike, Nation Destroying Silver Bullet Wave, Demon Lord Chonglu, Immortal General Fei Peng. Excited that so many customers came into the shop, Li Wuya began to explain the game in detail. The visitors exchanged a look of bafflement. Zhongwu froze for a moment and looked at the middle-aged man wearing the long robe, saying, Elder Yu, shall we? This middle-aged man was an elder of the Heavenly Academy responsible for the management of Taiwan Inn. He nodded. Then, under Mr. Fang's instruction, they entered the game. Dozens of people stood behind them to watch. some of them were the two men's guards while others were a small group of cultivators who had watched the battle but held no ill intentions. "What is this?" Elder Yu almost jumped from his seat, and his voice was full of horror. "Is this the immortal realm?" Zhongwu looked terrified. "I saw an immortal. The immortals are fighting. Run!" Quick scared, both of them dropped their virtual reality headsets. It was so scary. They were still frightened. "There are immortals in there." Elder Yu had cold sweat on his face. "Fortunately, I ran fast. It was horrifying. He hacked down an immortal palace with one sword strike. I'm proud that I could flee from an immortal. I even saw a demon. Fortunately, he didn't discover me." Elder Yu said in horror. They turned around and saw a group of dumbfounded people. Mr. Fang was also dumbfounded. "I already told you that it's a game. Are you all like this when you're playing games? We have only heard of the legends about immortals, but we had the opportunity to see a real immortal today." Zhongwu patted his thigh and said with a heavy sigh, "The almighty immortal power is terrifying." Others around them looked baffled. "So powerful. We might not be able to escape after we enter, right?" Mr. Fang, he had no choice but to explain to them the concept of virtual reality games once again in detail. "You mean, this is a fantasy realm?" Zhongwu shook his head. "No. No. What kind of fantasy realm is it that I can't even spot and identify?" After all, back when he explored an immortal relic, he had encountered a fantasy array built in the ancient times. It was a narrow escape, but he had discerned that it was a fantasy realm very soon. It must be noted that that place was probably an immortal relic from the prehistoric times. "How can this fantasy realm of yours be more powerful than that one?" Elder Yu said solemnly, "When you enter that realm, you must be very cautious. Otherwise, the immortal might kill you with one casual strike. And you will die." The others exchanged a look and took his words to heart. Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. He wondered how he could instill the idea that this was indeed a game into them. Finally, he decided to enter the game in person and played it to prove his points to them. After that, he looked back at Zhongwu and Elder Yu, and those two's faces instantly reddened with embarrassment. "Hey, was it really necessary to slap our faces like this? He he he. Indeed, there are senior masters in the shop, this fantasy realm sure is advanced. Even we were fooled by it." Elder Yu tried to smooth things over with an embarrassed expression. "It seems that the shop owner indeed has a grand master behind him." The shop fell silent. Everyone looked at these two people with new expressions. The two men fell silent. They could never erase this humiliation from their history no matter how they explain it. They felt like killing all the people here for witnessing their humiliation. Meanwhile, the legend of the Sword and Fairy Communication Group had completely gone off track. "Su Tianji, Xiaoyu, how many spiritual items have you collected?" Husky's dull cute face, Song Qing Feng, "Xiaoyu, do you have the confidence to take the first place?" Nalan Hung Guyu, "Xiaoyu, post another picture. I heard that the shop owner is back." Ruan Ning, how powerful are your rivals? Are they hard to deal with? Li Haoran, are the new bullets that our Wu Vi Daoist alliance created effective? Mr. Fang saw the sign of 999 plus on the corner of the group chat icon, and he messaged the group. How come there are so many messages in the group chat? Ruan Ning, scummy boss. Lan Yan, you didn't show any care for Xiaoyu. I'll wait for a second. Zhang Xiaoyu blinked and took another picture. See? No one dares to get close to me. There's no one around. Xiaoyu is awesome. You're getting more and more powerful. Meanwhile, on the spiritual ship of Heavenly Academy, the black-robed Daoist, Baoping spiritual master, and the white-clothed cultivator were all staring into the mist before them. In the middle of the mist was Zhang Xiaoyu. The black-robed Daoist said, "Well, This girl does nothing but play with the communication jade. She's so badly behaved. Baoping spiritual master wondered, how come this girl is so lucky? She hasn't encountered any other cultivators after walking for so long. The white-clothed cultivator said, if it were me, I would have ambushed her somewhere along the way. This girl is so careless that it will take less than 2 attacks to suppress her. They were feeling a little impatient and wanted to see someone attack her. Anyone can jump out and rob her collection. This girl is boldly walking in the middle of the road and playing with the communication jade without a care. She has no regard for the exam of the Heavenly Academy. Someone, jump out and teach her a lesson. As for the girl in blue who was walking beside Zhang Xiaoyu, they completely ignored her. After all, in their eyes, she was an insignificant figure from nowhere and they didn't think she could do anything. They continued to watch Zhang Xiaoyu. 2 hours later, how come no one is coming her way? They had watched Zhang Xiaoyu play with her communication jade for 2 hours. This spiritual spell that they were using was called Seeing Flower in the Mist, which could pull in the distant view and even recreate the sounds. However, the resolution was moderate. They could clearly see the people inside but not the tiny words on the communication jade that looked like mosquitoes. 6 hours later, hey! Some people are over there. The white-clothed cultivator yelled, some people are coming their way. Where are they? The black-robed cultivator said, hurry. Move the spiritual spell to them. Then, they saw 5 cultivators who were wearing yellow robes. These 5 people, the white-clothed cultivator looked thoughtful. You know them? Baoping spiritual master asked. A little bit, the white-clothed cultivator said. These 5 people call themselves the 5 Immortals of Yellow Dragon Cave and are famous for their coordinated group attacks. When they attack together, even people like Wang Xie and Sun Yuan will probably feel a headache. The 5 people seemed to have noticed that there were people in front of them. Boss, some people are before us. Just 2. The yellow-clothed cultivator who looked to be their leader brightened. Only 2? It seems like this is our chance to become rich. It seems that they haven't seen us, boss. So careless. The cultivator in the lead said with a laugh, so arrogant. We'll teach them a lesson. They deserve it. The 3 people of the Heavenly Academy who were watching the scene said, well said. This girl deserves a lesson. She will know that our Heavenly Academy's exam isn't child's play. While they watched intently and wondered what these 5 people would do, the 5 yellow-clothed cultivators laid an ambush with concentration. Boss, they are getting closer. Is everything set? The cultivator in the lead asked. Everything is ready. Good. The cultivator in the lead looked pleased and raised his hand. While the girls got closer, they finally saw their faces. Boss, at this moment, the cultivator in the lead waved his hand. Run! In the blink of an eye, they were all gone. The 3 people sitting on the sky patrolling spiritual ship looked at each other and saw the shock. Why are you running from them? Come back! Back! Why did they run away? She is just a lowly who is concentrated on playing with her communication jade. What are they afraid of? Feng Yangzi smiled embarrassedly and then slammed his hand on the table before yelling, these people are foolish and don't know what is going on. She's still playing with her communication jade, doesn't she know how dangerous it was for her a moment ago? The black-robed deist said with a snort, if those people didn't run, this girl would have, forget it. Forget it. Don't worry, the Baoping spiritual master said, there are many masters in this academy exam. I just don't believe that no one can teach this girl a lesson. They continued to watch the scenes in the mist. Meanwhile, in the Yuanyang City shop of Origin Internet Club for the Demon Clan, the more ancient the bloodline was, the more difficult it was for the demons to perfectly transform into their human forms, except for the Zhang family, which was a perfect demon family which had merged the transformation technique into their bloodline. Transformations were different from the illusion spell. Transformations could completely alter a creature's physical structure while the illusion spell could only use essence to create a fake appearance. The difficulty level between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. It was why the burly general of the King Kong ape clan sitting beside Zhang Xian still had a hairy face. Even Zhen Yan and Xue Ming, Zhang Xian's guards, didn't look like normal humans. One of them had a red face while the other had a green sharp face. As for the big white deer, it might transform into a creature with a human body and a deer head before it made a total transformation. Look over there, are they from the demon clan? It's said that many demons have entered this year's Heavenly Academy exam, including the little princess of the Zhang family. Is it really from the demon clan? Isn't it just a deer? The big white deer was at a loss for words. It was enraged, and it thought, what's so bad about being a deer? How come deers can't be demons? Many cultivators who hadn't begun playing the game yet pointed at the big white deer which was playing the game in earnest while sitting in a gaming chair and sipping coke. Can this deer play the game too? It's nothing extraordinary, Li Xiner said when she walked past them. She had gotten used to this scene after a few days. It's said that a demon plays games in another shop front. It is a big pure demon that comprehended the laws of nature. These cultivators forcefully swallowed their saliva and said in trembling voices, they are not afraid that the demon will devour the people in the shop. Li Wei stood beside them and was at a loss for words. Stop watching them. Let's go and play the game. Meanwhile, the big demon who they talked about was sitting on a computer chair bundled in a big quilt. From the looks of it, it had just finished playing games. While sipping the milk tea with enjoyment, it exhaled a warm breath. Humph! You want to suppress me? You don't allow me to take in natural spiritual essence? I can spend some crystals and increase my cultivation strength by playing games. With the method in the shop, even people with zero talent can obtain cultivation strength quickly. Excellent! Ha ha ha! I'm so smart! After I regain my cultivation strength, it began to imagine how it would punch Mr. Fang and kick the cunning female demon who loved scheming against it after it recovered its cultivation strength. Meanwhile, the number of usages on the teleportation array jumped. 13, 14, 15, 16. It jumped up quickly. When the big demon finished its milk tea, it looked down at itself in astonishment. Where's my cultivation strength? I got some strength after playing the games for one day with a lot of effort. Where is it? Demon Fang! You're despicable! Return my cultivation strength! Ah! A shrill howl came from the half-city shop. You want cultivation strength? Nearby, Mo Xian and the other people from her faction sat together with disdainful looks on their faces. Yet, you should be thankful that the shop allows you to play games, Yu Yan said with a snort. If you howl again, we'll ask Mr. Fang to toss you to Zhuhua City and keep that Gongzi Xiao company. Achoo! Xiao Yulv, who was eating fruits in boredom at the counter, looked around. Who's bad-mouthing me behind my back? Meanwhile, the new players in the Yuanyang city began to play The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. On the Heavenly Academy's sky-patrolling spiritual ship Quick. Look! Someone's coming! The cultivators with extremely high cultivation strengths began to feel sleepy after waiting for a long time. At this moment, they finally saw the scene that they had been waiting for. Several figures were moving this way. They are people of the Su family. Under the 7 ancient families, there were 12 big families that also had solid backgrounds, being the top existences in the spirit state. The Su family was one of them and was ranked among the top of the families. No. Not only the Su family, Feng Yangzi said, here come people of the Sun family. Although Sun Yuan is not among them, they are way stronger than those 5 morons. Is that Lei Ji? Looking at the imposing and tall figure who was wearing a short-sleeved robe, the Baoping spiritual master said, isn't he the super genius of the Lei family? He is said to have strength no less than those geniuses of the ancient families with great inheritance, right? Let the 7th girl help her, the black-robed deist said. We can't let this little girl get kicked out of the exam, okay? But tell her not to offer help too soon, Fang Yangzi said, let this little girl have a taste of the hardship first. Spiritual spell? Turn it over. Turn it. At their urges, the Baoping spiritual master changed the scene, and a woman wearing a bamboo hat and a pure white daoist robe with patterns of cranes appeared before them. She had a 3-foot water-clear sword in her hand. On the ground before her were many corpses of demon beasts. This girl's sword techniques are still powerful. The black-robed middle-aged man stroked his beard. The young people are indeed powerful. Feng Yangzi said. The Baoping spiritual master nodded in satisfaction. The woman suddenly froze and then took out her communication jade. Senior sister, what's wrong? The green-clothed girl beside her asked in bafflement. Nothing, the woman said. The elders ordered me to run an errand. We'll go that way. She pointed at the direction of Zhang Xiaoyu. The little girl of the Zhang family should be able to hold on for a little while, right? Feng Yangzi said. Humph. If she can't, she doesn't deserve the effort that we spent on her. Daoist friend Baoping, turn back to her and have a look, the black-robed daoist immediately said. The scene returned to Zhang Xiaoyu. The lowly was still playing with her communication jade. From the looks of the surroundings, she had come to a new spot and was no longer there. There was no one around. The people on the sky patrolling spiritual ship were baffled. Where are they? Then, they saw Zhang Xiaoyu holding about 10 more storage spiritual artifacts in her hands. Before her, a little girl wearing a white dress and a woman in blue walked deeper into the thin mist. What's wrong? The people on the sky patrolling spiritual ship suddenly stood up, finding the scene created by the spiritual spell that had looked clear begin turning fuzzy as if it was being covered in a thick fog. The fog got thicker, and finally they could see nothing but white mist. All the surroundings even turned white, let alone the people in it. Are there maze arrays among the restriction arrays? The Baoping spiritual master asked. Who said it? No. Feng Yangzi said, in the whole exam area, we have set all kinds of restriction arrays except for maze arrays. Since it took people a long time to walk out of maze-style restriction arrays, if they put several of such arrays in the area, the exam would probably take more than 1 month to finish. The only explanation was that some participants in the exam set up an array in the surrounding area. From the looks of it, it wasn't an ordinary array. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to block their view. At this moment, Zhang Xiaoyu had just sent a message on QQ using her communication jade, but the small round symbol kept spinning. The message wasn't sent out after a long time. Then, she saw the signal bars on the top right corner of the screen jump from full to 1 bar, and then... No internet! Zhang Xiaoyu yelled in surprise. She was having a good time talking to the people in the internet cafe on QQ, but suddenly she lost all signal. It seems that we have entered an array. Beside her, Li Lanruo looked around and found the white fog extremely creepy. Obviously, the cultivators who had built such an array here in a short time were much more powerful than the cultivators they had met before. About 500 meters above them in the sky, Nangang Zhou stood with his hands clasped behind him with arrogance in his eyes. He looked down and saw the thick fog engulfing everything nearby like a huge tomb. Young Master Nangang, a young man wearing the disciple uniform of the heaven-seeking sword palace said, they have entered the array. Nangang Zhou condensed spiritual essence in his eyes and looked down. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaoyu, who had a communication jade in her hand, had walked into the array with Li Lanruo. This little girl has been playing with her communication jade all the way here, the disciple of the Nangang family said. She doesn't have the slightest regard for us. With gritted teeth, he said in thrill as he vented his frustration. Now, the circulation of spiritual essence inside the array follows the circulation of the array, cutting all signals transmissions with the outside world. I'll see how she can play with it. This array used a very complicated spiritual essence flow to form illusions. Meanwhile, this continuously flowing spiritual essence stopped the transmission of the spiritual essence signals. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiaoyu shook her communication jade in anger, but there were still no signals. Got it. She rolled her dark eyes as if an idea dawned on her. She took out a small, strange-looking box from her storage spiritual artifact and plugged it to her communication jade. She touched the virtual signal icon on her communication jade and chose the option of high-frequency radio signals. Soon, the signal icon rose from 0 to 2 bars. Then, she continued chatting on QQ. My internet connection was down, Husky's dumb and cute face, and the signal still isn't strong now. It seemed like something had interrupted the signal, but she could still use the communication jade. Then, she sent a photo that she just took in which the people of the Su family and the Sun family lay on the ground randomly. Look, I knocked down a few more rivals. Su Tianji, internet connection was down? How did that happen? Zhang Xiaoyu replied, I don't know. We're surrounded by thick fog, some damn people built an array here. In the sky, the disciple of the Nangong family looked as if he had just swallowed a fly. This little girl is still using her communication jade. Shall I, he said in resentment, shall I take that communication jade from her? They had cut off all communications with the outside world with this special array, yet this girl was still playing with her communication jade. It's not necessary. She won't cause big trouble for us, Nangong Zhou said in a cold voice. For the sake of the mystic fate jade, my Nangong family must take some blame, but I don't believe that the Zhang family and the Heavenly Academy will fall out with us for a woman of a small family. Young master, you're right. She's just a little girl and can only deal with those wastrels even if she is strong. The disciple flattered him. If you show your hand, she won't stand a chance. Don't hurt the little girl of the Zhang family. Right now, only we know about the real secret about the mystic fate jade, and it's not necessary to antagonize that family. Yes. Young Master Nangong, that person of the Heavenly Academy is coming, another young man said, his black robe and black clothes didn't show his background. Block her first. Nangong Zhou's face turned dark. It seems that we must make our move now, fast. Little princess of the Zhang family. While Zhang Xiaoyu was complaining about the poor signal, a figure flew down from the sky. Nangong Zhou stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, looking cold and indifferent. We meet again. The presence that he emitted was much more powerful than ordinary cultivators, and Li Lanruo was forced to take a step back subconsciously while yelling in alarm, Are you a member of the Nangong family? You again? Zhang Xiaoyu said in displeasure, What do you want? Hand over your communication jade and this woman of the Li family, Nangong Zhou said. After that, you can continue with the academy exam and play with another communication jade, princess. We won't interfere with anything you do. You even want to take my communication jade? Zhang Xiaoyu yelled angrily. The disciples of the Nangong family beside them snickered. Princess, Your Highness, I advise you to hand over your communication jade and the woman behind you right now. If you force our young master to make a move, you will eat a nasty fruit. Who wants to eat a nasty fruit? Zhang Xiaoyu snorted, Why are you so smug? If that's what you want. Nangong Zhou's face turned livid since it was the first time that he received such a blatant refusal. Then, I'll teach you a lesson, reckless girl. While he spoke, Nangong Zhou reached out his right hand, suddenly forming a huge hand condensed by dark clouds before Zhang Xiaoyu. The huge hand grasped toward the two girls with vicious force. Meanwhile, her left hand moved in a circle and pushed out like a thunderbolt and a fast ghost, striking with a tremendous force, tearing sky and expelling clouds, the seventh move of the cloud-expelling palm. An energy hand that could tear open the sky crashed out with vicious force. With a tearing noise, Nangong Zhou's energy hand full of spiritual essence was instantly torn open. What? Young master! The disciples of the Nangong family looked anxious and alarmed. Nangong Zhou's face turned even more livid with humiliation, and he said with narrowed eyes, It's okay. I just used 1/10 of my strength in that attack. I'm surprised that a little girl like you has such a high cultivation strength. No wonder you act so arrogantly. Nangang Zhou brought his hands together before his chest and formed a strange spiritual seal, saying with a cold voice, "This is the Thunder Flame Sword seal of the Nangang family, you should feel honored that I am going to use this technique on you, little girl." Flames surged up in the area and soared into the sky like a dragon before spinning around. Instantly, it transformed into a huge sword of flames above the people's heads, hovering in the sky and not attacking while creating huge and ear-piercing noises of thunder, freezing all the people under it with a mountain-like pressure. Li Lanruo saw a small hand reaching toward her. "Sister Lanruo, record the battle for me." "Humph." Li Lanruo. She circulated Su Changqing's advanced mental technique of the Shu Mountain faction and murmured, "It seems like I can move, hey." Immediately, she turned the communication jade toward the battlefield. Burn! At Nangang Zhou's yell, flames poured down from the sky like surging waves of the ocean. They swallowed Zhang Xiaoyu almost instantly. The disciples of the Nangang family looked smug. "Little girl, do you still dare to challenge young master?" At this moment, they felt a horrifying heat wave spreading out in all directions. A terrifying flame pillar suddenly shot up from the spot where Zhang Xiaoyu stood. The disciples of the Nangang family looked surprised. Dragon flames! The flame pillar spread out swiftly like an explosion. It was the desperation move of Kyokusanagi Mushiki. Surrounded by burning orange flames, a tiny figure dragged out a blurry wave of shadows at a great speed. Nangang Zhou only saw a fist shadow crash toward him with many fist shadows behind it. The fist moved so fast that it was beyond his imagination. Almost instantly, a layer of vague lights suddenly shot out of his luxurious robe. Then, Zhang Xiaoyu's fist crashed onto the clear light. Nangang Zhou looked surprised yet still arrogant. "Even though you broke my Thunder Flame Sword seal, can you break my Qinyan Daoist robe? You are only a teenager, and the gap of cultivation strength between us is too big for you to close." Before he could finish, his expression changed drastically. The many fist shadows behind Zhang Xiaoyu combined into one. The fist shadow looked solid and no longer vague. Bam! 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 It hammered onto Nangang Zhou's luxurious Daoist robe as if it was beating on a drum. This wasn't the end. Zhang Xiaoyu waved her hands, and exploding flames appeared in her palms. Then, Zhang Xiaoyu leaped up, and the flames in her hands rose like dancing dragons. With a series of explosion noises, Nangang Zhou's robe bulged, and the clear light in front of his chest shattered. A big crack appeared in the layer of clear light. Many dashes of flames surged into the crack. Unprepared, Nangang Zhou was sent flying backward. Zhang Xiaoyu landed on the ground and dusted off her hands. She smugly said to the dazed Li Lanruo beside her, "Sister Lanruo, did I look dashing?" "This technique is called Desperation Move, Mushiki." Zhang Xiaoyu told her everything in detail. "If I was more experienced in using this technique, I could have pierced 1,000 of these useless robes." The disciples of the heaven-seeking sword palace and the cultivators of the forces under the Nangang family fell silent with dark expressions. "Young master, are you okay?" A few disciples of the Nangang family ran over to him in alarm. Nangang Zhou spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned wicked and distorted, and only endless hatred could be seen in his eyes. "You are seeking death." He opened his mouth, and a surge of black essence shot out. It was a small shiny black sword that had a strange shape. The moment the sword shot out, thunder instantly rumbled in the clear sky. "Young master, this is..." In horror, the disciples of the Nangang family looked at the strange-shaped small sword that was as black as ink. The small sword seemed to contain a creepy demonic energy which could absorb people's souls. After one glance of the small sword, the few disciples of the Nangang family seemed to have lost their free will. Their pupils expanded, and their eyes looked dull and glassy. They felt as if many evil devils and demons were whispering into their ears, triggering the craziest and evil thoughts in the depths of their minds. The sky turned even gloomier and darker as if it was trying to pull all the living people into a dark abyss. About 500 meters away, the green-clothed girl yelled in alarm, "No! Senior sister, Nangang Zhou is using that sword." Nangang Zhou's talent and comprehension might not be the best among the geniuses, but he had a powerful spiritual sword that was born with him. When this sword was used, nothing could block it. When Nangang Zhou was 19, he had used this sword to kill a three-headed demon dragon in the heavenly abyss sea, shocking the whole world. "Go away!" The woman wearing the white daoist robe looked cold. Dozens of elite cultivators with high cultivation strengths blocked her way. "I'm sorry," the leader of the group said arrogantly, "young master told us not to let anyone pass." On the other side, all the people around Nangang Zhou emitted strange red lights from their glazed eyes. As if they were crazy, they lunged at Zhang Xiaoyu with speed and power that were inhumane. If they had to be described, they looked like the sword slaves that had battled with Fang Qi. While recording the battle with the communication jade, Li Lanruo chanted, "Remain icy clear in mind, stay calm if the sky crashes down." She looked like she wasn't affected. Nangang Zhou's face twitched. However, he was satisfied with the effect and said with a sneer, "I'll see how you handle this." These cultivators looked as if they had gone mad, their attacks were even more vicious than before, and their cultivation strengths grew as if they had taken some magic potion. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaoyu took out a stack of rune notes and tossed them into the sky. While the rune notes moved into positions, a Kirin-like beast engulfed in flames appeared before Zhang Xiaoyu. The rare beast took in a deep breath and grew as high as a two-story building, turning into a huge monster with two horns on its forehead. Two disciples of Nangang family lunged at it as if they were crazy. The monster swung out its two front paws. Boom! Then, these two disciples flew backward as if they had been hit by a train. Next, more disciples of the Nangang family lunged at it with vicious techniques as if they didn't care about their lives. They instantly inflicted several wounds on this monster. Casually, Zhang Xiaoyu increased their defenses and cast a spell, and a wave of clear light surged up above the monster's head. It was the healing spell. The wounds on the monster's body quickly healed before their eyes. "Nangang Zhou! What the heck is this?" Zhang Xiaoyu waved her small hand. Pale blue spiritual light rose from the ground, and the disciples of the heaven-seeking sword palace who charged at Zhang Xiaoyu looked as if they had crashed into a wall and began to turn around in the circle of spiritual light. Demon trapping spell. With fewer people attacking it, the godly beast instantly felt less pressure. It spat out a beam of fire, and the cultivators screamed with flames all over their bodies. Nangang Zhou's face turned darker. He had thought that the little princess of the Zhang family could do nothing but eat. He had never heard anything about her cultivation strength and thought that she was absolutely no match for him and the other geniuses. If not for the fact that she came from the Zhang family, he would never have spared her a glance. But now, Nangang Zhou's expression turned from disdainful to grim while he slowly said, "I admit that your strength makes you qualified for being a descendant of the Zhang family. Given more years in cultivation, you might have the power to become one of the strongest among the younger generation." He let out a furious roar, and the small black sword beside him also created a crisp, high-pitched sword cry. The sword cry was so sharp and wicked that it seemed like it could enter people's brain through all avenues. The shrill screams pierced the people's minds like demonic music, and Li Lanruo had difficulty blocking it by chanting the Ice Heart mental technique from Wind and Cloud. "I will say it again." Nangang Zhou looked so gloomy that it seemed like he was on the verge of exploding. "Hand over the woman of the Li family." "Aya, how come you are so annoying?" Zhang Xiaoyu didn't bother to talk to him. Instead, she copied Mr. Fang's actions when he played Dante in Devil May Cry 3. She hooked her finger at her opponent and mocked. Dumbfounded, Nangang Zhou couldn't even believe his eyes. Even Li Lanruo beside her was stunned. When Nangang Zhou reacted, he exploded like a bomb, enraged that she not only refused to hand over the woman but even mocked him. More importantly, This mocking gesture resembled Mr. Fang's when he broke Nangang Zhuwen's immortal hacking sword array. It means that this girl probably is related to the murderer who had killed more than 100 people of Nangang family. After all, they both used Dante's classic mocking gesture. Reckless little girl, Nangang Zhou said fiercely, I tried to reserve my strength to show respect to your Zhang family, but you obviously are not grateful. Today, I'll let you know who you can mess with and who you shouldn't mess with. Crack! Nangang Zhou cut open his palm with the sword, leaving a shocking wound. Then, a thunderbolt exploded above his head, illuminating his deadly pale face. His messy hair fluttered and danced in the dark gale, and nauseating blood flowed all over his pale face, making this tall young man look like a fierce ghost from hell. Do you feel this force? Nangang Zhou's aura suddenly expanded, and the black energy which was turbid seemed to have condensed into a solid around him. The great force exploded all the surrounding rocks and trees into dust, shattering them into dust inch by inch. Right now, Nangang Zhou's face was distorted and wicked like a fierce ghost, and he sneered, I'm surprised that I must use my full strength against you, a little girl. You should feel honored. Now, I'll show you why my heaven-seeking sword palace can stand on top of all the other families. He brought his hands together before his chest, gathering the huge force. I'm the only genius of the Nangang family who can control the godly swords in the sword tomb without worrying about being reduced into a sword slave in the past 1,000 years. Today, I'll show you how big the gap between us is. Hack! Nangang Zhou yelled, and a black sword energy struck down like a thunderbolt. Boom! With a huge, deafening sound, it left a deep trail in the ground. Hundreds of meters away, the dozens of cultivators belonging to the forces under the Nangang family had been knocked down onto the ground. Such strong sword energy! The white-clothed woman was surprised. No! Nangang Zhou is unleashing his full strength. We must hurry over and rescue her. What the heck is Nangang Zhou doing? The green-clothed girl frowned. Does he want to create a war between the two families? However, when the sword struck down, it missed its target. You sure run fast. Nangang Zhou snorted and saw that Zhang Xiaoyu had moved to the side. She panted slightly, showing that it wasn't easy for her to dodge this attack. I'll see how many strikes you can dodge. Nangang Zhou shouted and slashed his sword again. Humph! Zhang Xiaoyu snorted and said, since this is the case, I'll show you a glimpse of the immortal wind cloud body, drunken immortal moon observing steps, and Tiangang battle qi. Gales whistled and blew up sand and rocks. Suddenly, the flying rocks around Zhang Xiaoyu paused in mid-air. Then, the surrounding sand and rocks in the were shattered into dust by an invisible energy that seemed righteous. She slashed out her sword, moving as unpredictably as the wind and clouds. When Nangang Zhou's sword missed its target for the second time, Zhang Xiaoyu had moved behind him. In the original version of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy, Liquor Sword Immortal taught Li Xiaoao the immortal wind cloud body and the drunken immortal moon observing steps before the latter went into the demon suppressing tower, and they were trump cards that were only inferior to the Liquor Immortal spell. In the original game, the drunken immortal moon observing steps combined with Tiangang battle qi had even greater damage compared to Sword God. If one added the immortal wind cloud body to this combination, one could even kill immortals. With these techniques and Jing Tian's close-range sword techniques, even 1/10 of their power was. White clouds floated around, and sword energies surged up. 3 minutes later Pu. Nangang Zhou spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was already covered in blood. He had done his best but couldn't land a single attack on his opponent. Humph! Now you've had a taste of the immortal wind cloud body, drunken immortal moon observing steps, and Tiangang battle qi, et. Zhang Xiaoyu said with a snort, I have many other techniques. Watch my unbound godly sword. A series of shrill screams came from the forest. We are here! We are here! 2 women rushed over with swords in hands. They were stupefied by the scene. Pleased to see them, Nangang Zhou, who had blood all over his face, reached his hand to them. "Help, I see nothing, you guys can continue." The two women were instantly gone. Then, the white-clothed woman dashed back and added, "I will be outside on watch, and I will warn you if someone comes." With that said, she left again. Nangang Zhou. Zhou. How about the seventh girl? Can you reach her? Baoping spiritual master asked. Yes. Feng Yangzi said while holding his communication jade. She said, "There's a small situation over there." A small situation? Can she handle it? She said there is no problem. They walked over to read the communication jade. No problem? That's good. The black-robed deist heaved a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, in the area of no problem, Nangang Zhou sat inside a shaky spiritual light barrier surrounded by all kinds of broken spiritual treasures, and his small sword looked dim. With a heavenly insight token in his hand, he looked disheveled and terrified. "Little girl, don't be so arrogant. I can get out when the elders come," he yelled with false courage. Dang! 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 Something violently hammered on the barrier set by the heavenly insight token, and it was obvious that the defense wouldn't last long. It seemed like a mysterious and strange force stronger than the force that Nangang Zhou could control was trying to gush out from the small sword, and its gloomy presence was fear-inducing. However, an unrivaled sword spirit that seemed to come from the heavens reached over. Instantly, that strange force in the small sword abated as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the elders sat around a small round table. "Since seventh girl said that it is fine, I'm sure it's nothing serious. Let's drink some wine." Anyway, they couldn't see the inside of the array. "We've monitored the girl of the Zhang family for such a long time, we must take a break." With the heavenly insight token in his hand, Nangang Zhou was still waiting for the rescue. 3 minutes later, more screams came. "Senior sister, is it okay for us to do this?" The green-clothed girl looked back at the depths of the forest and shivered. "Will something serious happen?" The woman said calmly, "Don't worry. Even people of the Nangang family don't dare to kill people of the Zhang family in this place unless they are crazy." I thought Nangang Zhou went crazy, but it turned out that he unleashed his full force since he was forced into a corner. After all, if they killed people in this place, they would offend not only a big family but the Heavenly Academy as well. In fact, they might even offend all the forces that were intertwined and had obtained favors from the Heavenly Academy. They would be in big trouble, and it couldn't be explained with a few words. She said with a smile, "Despite her young age, I believe that little girl knows when to stop." Besides, Nangang Zhou is still screaming, so it means what? "It means that he can take more beatings," the woman said mildly. "I've been wanting to beat him for a long time. If he needs more beatings, we can help her." The green-clothed girl didn't know what to say for a while. "Senior sister, you're experienced at this." A while later, they saw Zhang Xiaoyu and Li Lanruo strolling out of the forest. "Princess Xiaoyu, is it really okay that we beat the people of the Nangang family senseless like that?" "Why not?" Zhang Xiaoyu said in anger. "As boss said, the pompous asterisks always need a good beating." Hearing her words, the faces of the two people of the Heavenly Academy twitched. "Well, it's a pity that I didn't have the opportunity to use all my techniques." Zhang Xiaoyu stretched her arms in some disappointment. While looking at the two girls, she said, "Thank you for what you did just now." They were super nice as they had even stayed on guard for her. "Oh, right. What are your names?" "I'm Zhang Xiaoyu, and this is Sister Lanruo." "My name's Mu Qing," the green-clothed girl said cheerfully. "My senior sister's name is Yu Bai. What a coincidence that you both have the character Yu in your names." "Excellent." Zhang Xiaoyu was in a good mood since she had vented her anger and met two friendly girls. "Can we be friends?" She took out another bag of potato chips from her storage bag. Boss said that I can only open a new bag of potato chips if I share the snack with my friends in school. I guess we can do it now. She looked smug since she had made new friends, and her boss could stop nagging her. Ching. Bai, Zhang Xiaoyu looked at them. Should I call you Little Ching and Little Bai? TL note, in this context, Ching means green, and Bai means white. Little. Ugh. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang returned to the shop, looking fatigued. He plunked onto a couch and said, Little Xiner, get me a bottle of Coke. Okay. Then, he clicked open the system interface. He could finally sit down and rest. Since he still had a reward of the fortune prize wheel waiting for him, he opened the system interface while reading the messages in the group chat in QQ. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiaoyu was holding a big bag of potato chips in her arms. What's that? Why are you so cautious with it? This is the super delicious cucumber-flavored potato chips from our shop. Zhang Xiaoyu introduced the snack proudly, only I have this snack, and I brought it here from a place far, far away. Do you want to try some? A fresh fragrance floated out from the bag. Wow! Mu Qing took one piece and yelled in astonishment, almost swallowing her fingers. Fragrant and crisp with a special fresh taste. I feel like I walked through a spiritual plant garden of mature spiritual fruits. Senior sister, you try one. It looks like an ordinary snack. Yu Bai looked curiously at the big bag that Zhang Xiaoyu pushed to her face. She took one piece, and her eyes instantly widened. The sweet and fresh scent of spiritual fruit filled her mouth, and she felt a surge of fresh spiritual essence circulating all over her body. So good! Sister Lanruo, take some too. The four girls enjoyed the snack while walking. Sister Xiaoyu, where did you get this bag of super delicious potato chips? The two girls were amazed. Humph! Zhang Xiaoyu said smugly, I got it as a prize in a competition in the shop. It's not for sale. However, there are other good snacks in the shop such as Coke, spicy sticks, instant noodles. Meanwhile, bedlam broke out in the group chat on QQ. While explaining the snacks to the girls, Zhang Xiaoyu proudly posted the video of her battle with the powerful opponent she just faced in the group chat. Look! Look! Zhang Xiaoyu sent the message with a haughty expression, begging for compliments. Princess Xiaoyu, you're awesome! Immediately, a new member in the group with the picture of deer head as her profile picture answered her. Yo ha 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 ha! My Princess Xiaoyu is so strong! The big white deer laughed while it watched Zhang Xiaoyu's performance on the computer. Outside the Heavenly Academy, Yu Bai and Mu Qing listened to Zhang Xiaoyu's introduction while eating potato chips. Then, they suddenly saw her communication jade, and they asked, how come your communication jade can do so many things? With this communication jade, she can chat with a group of people and post pictures and even the video of the battle she just had? Mr. Fang posted a gif of Xiaoyu using the desperation move Mu Shiki, ending with the move of Soaring Dragon. On the bottom of the gif was the description, Xiaoyu's Soaring Dragon Fist. It looked cool and cute. Zhang Xiaoyu, hey! How come this picture of yours can move? Husky's dumb cute face, Nalan Mingxiu posted a picture of Mr. Fang smoking with the description, shop owner smoking loneliness. Not to be outdone, Su Tianji posted a screenshot of Senior Nalan using Sword 23 with the description, who else? The girls standing beside Zhang Xiaoyu gaped at the group chat where the people suddenly started to battle with memes. The needle on the prize wheel turned around and around. Slowly, it stopped on potato chips, and Mr. Fang froze. F***CK. Mr. Fang almost smashed the system interface. Then, he saw that the needle still had a little momentum left, and it slowly moved forward to the next item. Beep. You received a movie The Matrix. New task begins. New task, Alternative Civilization. Task description, the number of activations of the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 reaches 4,000, the number of activations of the Matrix reaches 1,000. Task Reward, StarCraft 2, Game Cultivation Room, 1 day, Mr. Fang. For those candidates who didn't plan to fight for the first place, most of them ended the exam after obtaining enough spiritual items. However, the competition among the top geniuses in this academy exam had just begun. Of course, the young master who had been beaten senseless didn't have to think about that. He was already disqualified from the exam, becoming the first person among the 7 ancient families who got disqualified from the Heavenly Academy exam in many years. Come out! The young man who seemed to be born with scholarly presence lightly stomped his foot while his gaze rested on a well-concealed hiding spot. I'm not in luck, a flippant voice sounded. I was hoping for some small opponents but instead got a big one. If Fang Qi were here, he would recognize that the voice belonged to Tang Yu. Meanwhile, outside the main gate of the Heavenly Academy a young man stood tall with purple essence emitting from his body. Sun Yuan's eyes widened when he saw a lowly, a green-clothed young girl, a blue-clothed beauty, and a girl in a white daoist robe walk over together. Sun Yuan, who was waiting to ambush other candidates, felt nervous, and his eyelids twitched. Ugh! We've arrived at the gate. Zhang Xiaoyu and her 3 companions froze in surprise. They had been staring at the wondrous communication jade in Zhang Xiaoyu's hand and the messages jumping in the group chat. Should we rob this guy before us? Yu Bai raised her head. Then, one of us will get first place. Sister Little Bai and Sister Little Qing, do you want to get the first place? Zhang Xiaoyu blinked her big eyes. You can take it if you want. If I take it, I'll have to cultivate with the old academy master, which will leave me no time to play games. Play games? Yet, Zhang Xiaoyu said morosely, I haven't gotten the chance to play the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 for days. I plan to play it every day after school, but this academy exam has lasted several days already. Sister Little Bai, I tell you that the Legend of the Sword and Fairy is my favorite game. Sun Yuan saw the 4 girls directly walk past him. Zhang Xiaoyu, pass. Li Lanruo, pass. Yu Bai, for Zhang Xiaoyu, her goal wasn't getting the first place, and no one expected her to take the first place anyways. For her, the Heavenly Academy exam was another battlefield in which the famous young masters gathered from all over the world to reach another summit in life with all the techniques they had learned. Thunder rumbled in the sky, seeming like it was going to really rain this time. Big, bean-sized raindrops fell and connected, forming a curtain of water in the world. The space between the sky and the earth all turned grey. Outside the Heavenly Academy, one side was filled with surging purple essence while the other side was filled with colorful light. The pouring rain seemed to be held up by an invisible force. Despite the inclement weather, some battles were destined to happen. Except for the dozens of new customers, the shop still had a slow business day as the computers had a low utilization rate. Outside the shop, the rain got heavier, and water drops smashed onto the ground outside the shop and created many dense white water flowers. Young Master Yu, why are you coming to this small shop in such bad weather? In the downpour, some vague voices came closer and closer to the shop. Why not? With a pot of wine in his hand, the newcomer seemed to be in a bad mood. He sounded disappointed, but perhaps he had never held any high hopes at all. It was a mood he rarely showed. After circulating his spiritual essence, he dried his damp clothes and saw that few people were playing on the computers. In contrast, there were more people sitting in the lounge area. Sir, didn't you say that Coke in your shop can lift one's mood? Forget it, get me a cup of milk tea. He waved his hand idly. There had been few customers in the shop today, but strangely, some people walked in from the downpour in groups of 3 or 2. In the curtain of rain outside the shop, 2 oil paper umbrellas appeared. The umbrellas were put away when they got under the eaves, and water drops slid down the tips. The first one was a young woman wearing a pure white daoist robe. Her slightly upward slanted eyes looked into the shop. Xiaoyu, is this the shop that you mentioned? Ugh! How come it is so quiet in the shop today? Zhang Xiaoyu pushed open the door with her small hands. Big brother! Boss! I brought 2 new friends with me. They are my senior sisters in the academy. If she carried a school bag on her back, she would look like an elementary school girl who was just released from school. Ugh! Zhang Xiaoyu looked at the big screen. What is boss live streaming today? In the half-city shop, Lu Ningyun, Mo Xian, and the others looked at the screen in surprise. Is the shop owner going to put The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 on the live stream? After all, Mr. Fang had been playing the game all by himself every day and had only done the live stream on the first day when he reached the spiritual state. Although Mr. Fang didn't put it on the live stream, there were many players playing the game due to the popularity of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1. As for the players who hadn't played The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1 before, they had no trouble playing The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. After all, the story for The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 happened hundreds of years before the story of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1. Ugh! Is this Jing Tian? In the original game, there was some display of memories of the characters' previous lives but not much, and the system version provided more details. The story was like a complete cycle of reincarnation with stories both in the previous life and the current life. He doesn't look like Jing Tian. Zhang Xiaoyu said in bafflement. Jing Tian had a rebellious personality. From some aspects, due to his low social status, he was similar to Li Xiaoao. However, this man in front of them was different. He was wearing armor and had deep and intense eyes. He had Jing Tian's looks but not his personality. Sir, what are you playing? The viewers asked with bullet comments. It looks like the country of Zhang in ancient times. It was fate that these 2 people would come together and experience another cycle of life from meeting to knowing each other. As time went on, some people would drift further apart in the human world while others would still drift toward each other even after 1,000 years. From Long Kui's few words, the players learned that Jing Tian had been the crown prince of the Zhang country in his past life hundreds of years ago, but no one had seen this previous life of his. There was a spiritual spell called Reliving Dreams like Roaming Immortals, which had also appeared in The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1. Besides the sporadic comments from the other characters, this spell could give the players some personal experience of the stories that happened in the characters' previous lives. Is this Jing Tian's previous life? He was Prince Longyang of the Zhang country in his previous life. Look! Is that little Kui? This pair of brother and sister are very close. How come you're all watching this? Tang Yu felt low, even though he had expected that he would lose to Wang Xie in the academy exam. He bought a cup of milk tea. Now that he wasn't in the mood to study machines, he sat on a couch and watched the live stream. Xiaoyu, Mu Qing asked in bafflement. What's this? Is it The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 that you mentioned? Castellan Zhongwu and Elder Yu sat on a couch with solemn expressions, each holding a bottle of Coke. I'm surprised that the shop owner has played to this part. Let's watch it. Zhongwu stroked his beard and said, well, at my old age, I'm surprised that I'm still envious of this young man for being a reincarnation of an immortal and having such a good sister. No. There are 2 sisters. Elder Yu said with a serious expression. Red Kuo is a bit unruly, but her spiritual spells and sword techniques are very powerful. How can you forget her? But Blue Hui is considerate and smart, which is what a lady from a big family supposed to be. Red Kuo is just derived from the demonic spirit in the demon sword. You know nothing. Blue Kui is too gentle and weak, which is why she's always in danger. I just like Blue Kui. What can you do about it? Hey! You old man! Elder Yu put his bottle of Coke on the desk heavily. The people nearby looked at them with dark expressions. Ahem! I won't argue with you. Let's watch the live stream. Instantly, they put on their serious faces in embarrassment. What a shame! This part of the story was told by an animation which showed the memories in their previous lives. The brother and sister relied on each other, but the king of the country of Zhang was severely ill, and the neighboring country invaded them. Long Yang, who was Jing Tian in his previous life, shouldered the burden. He helped his father manage the country during the day and practiced sword techniques during the night. However, he couldn't change the fate of the country alone. When the capital of Zhang was under siege, Long Yang broke the rule set by his ancestors and opened the scripture of the demon sword. He recruited alchemists and deists to make the demon sword, hoping that he could break the siege with the power of the demon sword. In the end, the demon sword wasn't finished due to the lack of a virgin girl's blood, since the king of Zhang didn't want to sacrifice other people's lives for it. Before the sword was made, the capital city was broken and conquered. Watching Long Yang fighting to the death in the battle to protect his country, his sister, Long Kui, jumped into the sword furnace, leaving her soul in the demon sword. Many people had their hearts in their throats, even though some of them had never played the game before. Then, they watched the previous lives of Su Chongqing and Ziai Xian, who had planned 3 reincarnations in order to live happily ever after, but at the end of the reincarnations, they were still defeated by fate. In fact, compared with the tragedy in The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1, the story of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 was happier and not as irreparable tragic. For the cultivators who had lived over 100 years in the real world, they put rationality over sensibilities, but it didn't stop them from having desires and wishing for things they couldn't get. It didn't matter if these things were real or not, as long as people had faith in them and believed in them, they were real in the people's minds. Compared with the story, the powerful techniques such as Sword God, Demonic Flame Space Flashing Strike, Nation-Destroying Silver Bullet Wave, and Jing Tian's horrifying close-range sword techniques became secondary. The story felt like a top-quality tea where the taste lingered with people long after they drank it. Tang Yu had planned to come into the shop and lift his low spirits with something new, but the result was that he got even more depressed. Each reincarnation would end. First was the story of Ziai Xian and Su Chongqing, and then the story of Long Kui, Xian Jian, and Jing Tian. More people entered Yuanyang City shop on the next day, let alone the other 2 shops. Brother Su? How come you're here? Brother Lei? Don't call me Brother Su. I've joined the Heaven-Defying Online Games Guild, and Vice President Xiaoyu ordered me to come here to greet the guild president. Ugh, Lei Ji's face twitched. Me too, ugh. Aren't they the weak cultivators defeated by Xiaoyu? Li Xiner, who had watched the video in the group chat in QQ, looked at them curiously. How come they are here? Zhang Xiaoyu looked proud of herself. At this moment, the audience almost cried when they saw that Long Kui jumped into the sword furnace once again before the battle with the evil sword immortal. Scummy shop owner! Do you know how to play it or not? Return my Long Kui! He couldn't even defeat the evil sword immortal. The scummy shop owner is useless. Bullet comments flooded the screen. Then, with red eyes, Mu Qing said, "This shop owner sucks at the game. I'm furious. I'll show him how to play it properly." She had been hesitant, but now she walked to the counter with clenched teeth. "Activate the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 for me." She slammed hundreds of crystals on the table. "Activate it for me as well." "Me too." The grand cultivators who had cultivated hundreds of years could still hold themselves in check, but the young people couldn't bear it anymore and swarmed to the counter. "With my excellent talent, I promise that no one has to jump into the sword furnace as a sacrifice if I play the game. Activate it for me too." With a dark expression, Yu Bai also tossed a bag of crystals on the counter. Without a word, she went to play the game. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang went to practice sword techniques after achieving the results he wanted. Different from The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1, The Legend of Sword and Fairy 3 had the possibility of a perfect ending, and the condition for this perfect ending was defeating Demon Lord Chonglu in the new immortal world. After that, Demon Lord Chonglu would resurrect one person. However, it was nearly impossible to defeat Chonglu even if the players used Jing Tian's body in the game. It seemed as if they had finally given up. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang was quite relaxed. He took the time to practice sword techniques and also sipped milk tea while reading the official novel of Diablo 2 on a couch. In the morning, the shop had a moderate amount of business. It wasn't busy or slow. The shop, which had been in the center of the storm, settled down. No one dared to mess with this shop since even the heaven-seeking sword palace could do nothing to it. Regardless of how great their background was, everyone coming into the shop abided by its rules, and no one made trouble. During this time, the neighboring shop had changed hands, and the clerk who used to stop people from entering Fang Qi's shop had disappeared, never showing his face in the area again. It took Fang Qi a long while to get used to this new development since he was used to the old environment. The spiritual state was indeed much larger than the deserted sea realm where Dajin was situated. The 7 ancient families were in different places on the continent. For most cultivators, they only heard the names of most of the families and never met anyone from these families. The Heavenly Academy was situated in the northern region of the continent, and further north was the Heaven-seeking Sword Palace and Heavenly Abyss Sea. North to the Heavenly Abyss Sea was the Zhang family and 12 demon clans. Yuanyang City belonged to the Heavenly Academy. In fact, Castellan Zhongwu had been a disciple of the Heavenly Academy. Of course, it was long, long ago. When the sun rose in the east, mild voices that were lecturing the disciples came from the Dao-seeking pavilion in the Heavenly Academy. Beside the lotus pond in the distance, a white-haired old man was focused on boiling a pot of tea. With a small and exquisite dark red enameled teapot in his hand, he moved in an unhurried and tranquil manner. He looked like an old man who was enjoying the last few years of his life. No one would think that he was the old Academy Master of the Heavenly Academy, a figure respected by the masters of the ancient families. Behind him quietly stood a scholarly young man wearing white clothes. Beside him was the black-robed daist who had monitored the exam. He looked serene, showing no complaints about standing there for a long time. The old man nodded. "I like your presence. I've had many disciples in my life and taught each of them one of my ultimate techniques. However, I've never taught anyone the Heavenly Insight Scroll. Do you know why?" This young man was Wang Xiat. Obviously, he had defeated Sun Yuan in that day's battle and won the first place. With a slight frown, he thought for a moment before saying, "I heard that the secrets of heaven are not to be leaked. Is it because this scroll contains the secrets of heaven and can't be known to other people?" The old man said mildly, "Not exactly. Not all heavenly secrets are unpredictable and unfit for people's knowledge. Otherwise, how would people have known about my Heavenly Insight Scroll?" "What is the reason then?" Wang Xiat asked curiously. The old man slowly said, "I don't know when the Heavenly Insight Scroll was created. The only thing I know is that ever since it came into existence, it has never made a mistake. If many people learn it, I'm afraid that it would cause changes in heaven and alter many people's fates. The Heavenly Insight Scroll is so powerful and accurate." The old man nodded. "I don't want to bring this technique with me to the netherworld. I think you have the right temperament to cultivate this technique. Today, I'll demonstrate it to you. Watch it carefully." With several yin-yang trigram tokens made by unknown materials in his hand, he said, "These are the necessary trigram tokens for cultivating the Heavenly Insight Scroll. Qian represents heaven and yang, Kun represents earth and yin. When yin and yang intertwined and connected, heaven and earth merged, and all the things in the world were created." The old man said, "If you have any questions, you can ask me. Today, I'll make an exception and answer a question for you once. It's a rare opportunity that Master is willing to answer something for you," the black-robed daist behind Wang Xie said in excitement. "You must grasp this opportunity." Master made accurate predictions about several treasures in the Fortune Golden Palace and never got one wrong. Since demonstration wasn't teaching, it was okay for the dark-robed deist to watch. Really? Wang Xie froze. Lately, I've been wondering about something. Since there were no treasures to hunt down for now, Wang Xie said after a moment of consideration, a few days ago, the sword slaves of the heaven-seeking sword palace were killed, and the young master of the Nangong family was weeded out from the exam to everyone's surprise. Also, the most popular topic in the Heavenly Academy is the legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 and the Origins Internet Club. I don't know what they are about, but they sound like a powerful immortal relic. Master, can you calculate and find out its background? Well, I thought you would ask something interesting, the black-robed deist said with a chuckle. I'm surprised that you are interested in this minor thing, it will be a waste of Master's efforts, pu. Before he could finish, the old man spat out a mouthful of blood. The trigram tokens before him suddenly shattered, and the teapot, the desk, the ground, and even the whole space began to tremble. Move, help me out of here. The black-robed deist's eyes opened wide. Wang Xie's mouth was wide open, and his jaw dropped. Boom! With an earth-shaking noise, the 6 spiritual artifacts which looked like yin-yang fish exploded, turning the place they were standing on into a pile of debris. They all fell silent. Origins Internet Club. Gu Tingyun regained his senses after a long while. Ugh! Yet, while his face twitched, Wang Xie couldn't remain cool anymore. Although he didn't know what expression he had, he knew that it was very ghastly. The black-robed deist was silent. Yes. Master, and what the heck is the legend of the Sword and Fairy 3? The old man asked with a dark expression. Wang Xie didn't know what expression he had right now. Ugh! I'm not sure. Junior sister Xiaoyu and the others often talk about it. I heard names such as Chonglu, Jingtian, and Su Chongqing. They even invited me to play it. Pu. Another mouthful of blood shot out. Today, I'll take some rest, the old man said listlessly. Tomorrow, you can take me to the Origins Internet Club. Chapter 450. What is the shop owner battling? They had different cultivation strengths and ages, but there were no ranks among them. After all, the disciples were all elites in the younger generation, and there was no need to rank them by force. In fact, some members of the big families entered the Heavenly Academy only to get the title and cultivated their own techniques inherited from their ancestors instead of the techniques of the Heavenly Academy. Thus, these people didn't have to stay in the Heavenly Academy every day for cultivation. Sun Yuan and Tang Yu were in this category. Of course, most people would choose to learn from a master in the Heavenly Academy. After all, they would have a faster speed in learning the basic cultivation techniques such as essence circulation and tricks in spiritual spells if they had a master to teach them instead of trial and erroring on their own. Boss, Mr. Fang was playing games intently when Zhang Xiaoyu walked into the internet cafe with several girls after school. Yu Bai said, a bowl of instant noodles and a cup of milk tea. Mu Qing shouted, Sister Xiner, I'll have a box of spicy sticks first. Young Master Su and Lei Ji said, we'll each have one set of these snacks. Boss Xiaoyu, what do you want? Instead of going to the counter, Zhang Xiaoyu ran to Mr. Fang. Boss, today, the elders taught us the composition of qi and the dao of yin-yang. He said something about the heavy is earth and the light is sky. I don't quite understand it. Do you know anything about it? As for this, while playing the game, Mr. Fang answered casually, qi mainly consists of hydrogen and oxygen. Oh, it consists of hydrogen and oxygen. Xiaoyu took out a small notebook and made notes on it. Then, what does the heavy is earth and the light is sky mean? Zhang Xiaoyu asked. Mr. Fang answered distractedly, it means that gases with a lower density such as hydrogen rises and becomes the sky, the gases with higher density such as carbon dioxide and oxygen fall down to the ground. Then, what are hydrogen and oxygen? I don't think the elders taught us these words. Hydrogen and oxygen are, Mr. Fang explained randomly, and Zhang Xiaoyu made notes. The others nearby gaped at this unusual teaching session. Soon Zhang Xiaoyu filled her small notebook with knowledge of middle school to high school level physics and chemistry. Ugh! While scratching her head, Zhang Xiaoyu read from her notebook, Qi is made up of invisible particles which are mainly H2 and O2. Above the sky is the ozonosphere which consists of O3, a substance made up with 3 oxygen atoms. Is that so? It sounds. I still don't understand. While holding her notebook, Zhang Xiaoyu looked puzzled. Maybe I should ask my big brother. Big brother. Zhang Xian was watching Jade Dynasty. Oh? Xiaoyu, you're back from school. Zhang Xian glanced at her and continued watching Jade Dynasty. Yes. The boss explained to me the composition of Qi, but I still don't understand it, Zhang Xiaoyu said. The composition of Qi. Zhang Xian waved his hand and said with confidence, Little sister, ask away. Mr. Fang is powerful, but his knowledge of Qi is absolutely not as deep as our Zhang family. After all, their family was an ancient family with a great inheritance and profound accumulation of knowledge. Great! Zhang Xiaoyu said in excitement, Boss just told me that Qi mainly consists of hydrogen and oxygen. Dumbfounded, Zhang Xian looked toward Mr. Fang. What kind of Qi is that? The sci-fi games and movies the shop had released, such as Resident Evil, Grand Theft Auto 5, and Counter-Strike, presented low-level sci-fi worlds. The items shown in them couldn't replace the most advanced spiritual artifacts and spiritual treasures, but they had a great impact on the low-level to middle-level spiritual artifacts and spiritual treasures. Of course, they only impacted and couldn't replace these spiritual artifacts which had many advantages that even modern technology couldn't achieve. However, they did provide new options for cultivators and warriors besides their own spiritual artifacts. To understand these new things, they must understand the basic science knowledge that they had never encountered before. However, the players who only played games instead of studying spiritual artifacts wouldn't pay attention to these things. Forget it. I'll bring my questions to the elders. Zhang Xiaoyu was not pleased. How come my big brother doesn't even know this? I'll go play games. She took an empty seat beside them. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang glanced at the task list and saw that the number of activations for the Legend of Sword and Fairy 3 had surpassed 2,000. Mr. Fang didn't live stream today. Instead, he continued to control Jingtian to level up and practice sword techniques. Different from the original game, even though the system version didn't set restrictions on the use of spiritual treasures, the treasures in the game were too precious, and they were all unique. They couldn't be obtained just by killing monsters over and over again like the original version. Therefore, the players must rely on their own combat techniques and Jingtian's strength. If the players' strengths weren't high enough, they must work hard to increase Jingtian's level, which would in turn increase their own strengths. This was why Fang Qi was not in a hurry to pass the game. He didn't step into the new immortal world until he thought he was ready. The shop owner turned on the live stream again. Which part is he going to play? Only the battle with Chonglu is left. On top of many old customers, the new customers sat down in the lounge areas as well. At this moment, a white-haired old man shakily walked toward the shop with the assistance of a black-robed daist and a white-clothed young man. It looked like this old man was going to fall if the wind blew on him. Is this the shop? The old man glanced at the interior of the shop. It seems ordinary. A shop like this exploded my trigram tokens while I tried to calculate what it was with my heavenly insight scroll. Help! Help me in, the old man said shakily. Please be careful. They pushed open the door and helped the old man walk in. Upon entering the shop, they saw a large group of people sitting on the couches in the lounge area by the entrance. They all stared at the big screen. What are they watching? Gu Tingyun glanced at the big screen curiously. Then, he saw a big white deer sitting nearby, and it had a serious expression on its face. We're watching the shop owner battle Chonglu, the big white deer explained kindly. Chonglu. On the big screen, a young man wearing a purple golden daoist robe and a luxurious headpiece stood there with the demon-suppressing sword, as immortal essence flowed around him. Standing opposite to him was a valiant-looking male demon with 2 horns, who was wearing a set of red gold armor. Jing Tian vs Chonglu. The last cycle of reincarnation in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 would end with this battle. Who is Chonglu? The big white deer pointed its front hoof at the big screen and yelled in excitement, the Demon Lord. Today, the shop owner is going to battle the Demon Lord on live stream. It's the last battle in the new immortal world and will be awesome. The 3 people who had just entered the shop asked, what? The black-robed daoist and Wang Xie shivered so hard that they almost threw away the old man who were they holding out the door. What is the shop owner battling? How come this little deer is watching this battle so calmly?